Call the meeting to order. City of University Heights City Council meeting, Tuesday, June 13th, 2017. We're at the Community Center, and all of council, 5 council are present.
Yes, the number I see.
First thing is approval of minutes. We'll go to May 9th council meeting minutes. Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. We also have minutes for the May 23rd special council meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. And then first thing is Resolution 1724, and Jim Lane and Larry Berger are going to talk about the GO bonding.
Go ahead, Larry.
Welcome, Larry.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Larry Berger, Superior Financial. You probably have met my associate, Maggie, at one of your meetings or so, and also she is my daughter. And she thinks she's my boss. So if you talk to her, tell her I did a great job tonight, because I think my review's coming up anyway. So. Anyway, as you can see, I handed out a letter with some bids behind it, and we did have a very, very good day in the market. As you can see, we will be recommending that you sell $295,000 general obligation corporate purpose bond series 2017 to Two Rivers Bank and Trust of Burlington, Iowa. They really kind of blew it out of the water. They sent us a bid for a 1.4892%. That is just absolutely amazing. We were expecting actually somewhere around a 2.9%. You can see Hills Bank and Trust really came in at right about where the market was, but I'll tell you, Two Rivers wanted this proposal, and so I would highly recommend that we give it to them. If you turn the page, I did notice a typo on my sheet here. I forgot to put the 2027 under Hills, so under the date 2027, they do have a 3% there. So if you want to correct that, I apologize for that. But as I said, we were projecting, because the Fed has raised interest rates on us a couple of times. We expect them to raise again, and we were expecting a much higher interest rate. Somewhere around a 2.9 is what we were projecting, and that would have cost the city about $59,000 in interest before you paid these off. As you can see from the right-hand column of the bid and bidder sheet here, you are going to pay $26,788 in interest instead of the $59 that we were actually projecting. If you turn, I did give you copies of the bids that we took. Again, the Two Rivers bid is on top, the Hills Bank and Trust. And then the final sheet in your handout is your final retirement schedule. And please note that we did mark the call provision. And a call provision is when you have the rights to do something with the bonds. You have cash ahead, you can pay them off if the interest rates are lower at the time, which probably they won't be. We can refinance them. We will watch this for you. You don't have to take a look at it. We put it into our system, and anytime there's an opportunity, we will let you know if there's a savings in refinancing, or if indeed you have cash, you certainly can pay this bond off after the call. Because bonds are investments, and the investors want to make sure that they get to hold their investments for a certain length of time. And so we have to negotiate the call with the underwriters and the banks to make sure that they don't penalize you in interest by making the call too short. So we have determined that the call is after 2023. At that time, you can do anything. Now, this is only up to the city to do something. The bank has no right to call them in, no rights to do anything else. These are locked-in rates for the duration for the 10 years that we have the bonds outstanding at the 1.489%. So with that, I would turn back to the cover sheet and recommend we sell $295,000 in general obligation corporate purpose series 2017 to the Two Rivers Bank and Trust of Burlington for the same price, $295,000, and a true interest rate of 1.48 4892. I would answer any questions that you have.
I move adoption of resolution number
I
1724.
second.
Okay, motion by Jim, second by Sylvia. Discussion?
Can we come back and get more money at this price if we need it, or?
You know, the market has not gone up as we had expected. It's gone up probably about 30 basis points. We really had anticipated the market to
Oh,
go
yeah.
up quite a bit.
Yeah, no,
And
I-
you wouldn't believe how many of my clients ask that very question after we bring them these rates.
I can imagine.
Jim, can
That's
you
great.
modify the resolution motion so that we adopt Two Rivers Bank and Trust?
Sorry, say that again. I don't,
Can the resolution be narrowed down to adopting Two Rivers Bank and Trust?
yeah,
I'll
Does
put
it-
it in to the minutes that way.
yeah,
The
okay.
resolution says,
Yeah.
The recommendation?
Resolution.
Oh, does it?
Specify.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was a little bit, yeah. Oh, this is great. I want to really thank Larry and Maggie for their good work. We had about, it's interesting, I'd given them about 6 different banks, and yet only these 2 responded. Hills, which has done good work for us before, in fact, had our last bond, and then, of course, the one we had for the intersection, everything at 1.77, which we all felt very good about, and thought, boy, if we got close to that, we'd be happy, and we kicked it right in the can there. So that's great, Larry. Thank you. Yeah, well, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
And Jim, thanks for all your good work on this. Long hours and good work. Thank you. Okay, the resolution number 1724 is before you. Roll call vote.
Zimmerman. Casada.
Aye.
Haverkamp.
Aye.
Lane.
Hi.
Maher.
Aye.
Carried.
Okay, we have 2 guests tonight. We have Rick Dobbins here, and we have Ron Berg. And they're going to talk about Johnson County Jail alternatives. The floor is yours, Dr. Dobbins.
Thank you, Mayor Fromm, Council, for it's Tuesday night, and I just feel I need to be at a council meeting. I don't know how you 3 do it, but I'm going to refer to the slides. I'm going to try and
Turn our heads.
be as narrative as I have to be. Actually, on your agenda, this is termed the Jail Alternatives Project. I would add to that, I would also say that this, what we call the Access Center, is also an emergency room alternative project. We're going to talk about what government does, and what government does is take care of people who just need help. In the present society and services can't take care of them. It's always negotiable exactly what the government should do in taking care of people, but these are the people who have issues of chronic mental health that we're talking about. When you think about, the people who our law enforcement personnel will detain, at some point in those with acute mental health crises or chronic mental health crises, there is a time in their lives when the world around them becomes chaotic. The way that our system does that is that it is our law enforcement personnel who are called to these situations as a 9/11 situation or something a little bit less than that to take care of these issues. Up until this point, there have been 2 or 3 options for our law enforcement personnel to do. That's take them to the emergency room, which in our environment typically is the University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinic, where I work. I'm the chief of our hospice service for the Department of Family Medicine. Ron Berg, who's with me, is the director of Prelude. And when law enforcement goes to the emergency room, that's one option. The other option is to the Johnson County Jail. The third option is to, frankly, walk away. All 3 options are bad options for people who are in this part of their lives where they're in chaos. If they go to the emergency room, and I'm going to talk about focus on law enforcement personnel, because these are the people who we pay to protect us. We help train them, and these are people who, frankly, we want to keep them out on the roads protecting our citizens. If they're in the university emergency room, as you know, because of the increased numbers of people that we have, especially 25% of the university emergency room population are people who will have chronic mental illnesses. Mike, could you switch that ahead? Okay. So the people who have come along to kind of help with this is, except for one person, this is a who's list in our county who you would want to convene and get together for these sorts of issues. Me, I'm just along for the ride. I'm the President Harold's appointee for the University of Iowa to this. But I'm sure a lot of you know the people on this slide, and in addition to Mr. Berg here, these are the people who we want to solve this problem of the access center. Next slide, please, Mike. So this is the current situation, and actually, this is actually put together by a citizen of the city of University Heights, Dr. Michael Flom, and he put this together because it is supposed to look like chaos, because it is chaos. This is what our law enforcement personnel have to deal with. They can bring someone in crisis to the emergency room, psychiatric hospitalization, they can go to the crisis center. This is not a very workable solution. Next slide, please, Mike. Keep going. So I'm going to have you roll through the next few slides
Sure.
here, Mike, in terms of going through this, the whole thing. Thank you.
Whoops, let me go
That's
back
fine.
one.
That's good.
Okay.
And so the other place to bring these people is to the Johnson County Jail. You all recall that there were issues of overcrowding, and Ron will go into that in just a little bit. But these are places where if you detain our law enforcement personnel inside the University Emergency Room for anywhere from 2 to 8 hours, or if you bring them to the Johnson County Jail and they have to come in with these personnel, the paperwork that they have to do, I'm sure Officer Lyon could easily tell you how difficult it is when that has to happen. So the third option, not to take them anywhere at all, does not give them the services that they need. We are thinking of a better option. Rather than homelessness, joblessness, it affects criminal justice issues, issues of substance abuse. Next slide, please. So what we've trained people, what do they do when they hit the wall? They go to the ER because that's what we've taught everyone to do. From there, the majority wind up in acute inpatient units. Like when you go to Midas, you go get a muffler. It's just something that we do, and it isn't necessarily the best system. It's not even close to the best system. If a hammer is the only tool you have, everything's a nail. Next slide. And so we get to the vision of what we want to do. And so what we're doing in the middle is that the Access Center is basically one-stop shopping. Is where a police officer, and we look at other systems in San Antonio, in Kansas City, Kansas, which have replicated this, and a law enforcement personnel can go there, drop them off, and it's an honor system. They finish out their paperwork, and they're gone in 5 minutes. There's currently something called crisis intervention training, and we've already done that twice, where officers are learning how to interact with people with chronic mental health illness. It's a great program. The only problem is that we train them to handle these people in the best possible way. We still have no reasonable place to bring them. Next slide, please. So what we have is the Behavioral Health Access Center is what we are recommending. Currently, there's a group made up of the Access Center and elected officials from the City of Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty, Johnson County, who are looking for spaces, primarily most likely in the City of Iowa City, to put this. And what this is it has different components. Ron will go into the details about these components, but this is basically where our law enforcement personnel or anyone can walk in, and there's a 24/7 triage opportunity. Many of the entities we know well, such as the Crisis Center, mental health services already exist, will be on site, prelude for chemical dependency issues. One-stop shopping, you walk in, and they have all these services as far as medical care, sobering units, telemedicine to the university emergency room to keep them from having to go to the university emergency room, jail diversion issues, crisis stabilization, one-stop shopping for all that they need to give them the care that they need. When you have someone that law enforcement detains and they shoot someone, clearly that person needs to go to the Johnson County Jail, irrespective of what mental illness they might have. If you have someone who's broken an arm, has a severe laceration, irrespective of their mental illness, they clearly don't need to go to the emergency room. There is a wide amount of people in the middle. And remember that 75% of the people in our jails have a chronic mental illness. And so we have to find a place where we can divert these people and give them the care that they need. They go to the jail, they become criminalized. They go to the university emergency room and they become medicalized. They need to go where they need to get the appropriate care. Next slide. So these are the places that we've taken a look at that have replicated the model. The Kansas City, Kansas model is a smaller site similar to Johnson County in terms of population. Next slide. Again, this is what we're taking a look at in terms of inflow would be law enforcement drop-off. The ER can send people to this. They can walk in. Mobile crisis is a part of our crisis center. Can bring people to the access center as well, any community agencies. And the low barrier shelter is basically a shelter. It's a wet shelter, if you recall. All entities provide care to the shelter house for the winter to provide year to year. And we think it's time to make this sort of a permanent structure and entity. Right now we're taking a look primarily in the winter months. But this is something that we have to, if we do it year by year, it's something we have to do in perpetuity. The sobering unit, I'll let Ron go into that as well. Case management there, like I say, the professionals that need to be there that aren't in the other areas will be there. Next slide, please. And so diverting unnecessary hospitalizations and helping people, crisis stabilization, it's not hospital-based. It gets away from that institutionalization toward medicine, which is not appropriate for hospitals. The same institutionalization that's not appropriate in our jails because of issues of criminalization. They connect the patients to the services that they need that are really not available in those two other sites. Next slide.
Okay, thanks, Rick, for getting us started here. Just getting warmed up. Will be another 30, 40 minutes. I want to go ahead and go down through this. There you go. Thank you. So really what we're talking about is making a common sense approach to this. And really that group of folks that Rick showed you from the beginning have focused on what we need to design for the individual from the ground up. That's really been our focus, is what does the individual in that mental health or that substance use crisis need, but also expanding that to what does their family need. So when the family is confronted with a mental health issue among their loved ones, where do they go so that they don't have those two poor choices of emergency department or calling the law enforcement. So we want a common sense approach. We want to do something that's worked elsewhere. We're not creating something new. We think we can do it much better, but it's building on models that we know have worked. And then really using this housing first approach, which is a model for homelessness population that right now in too many places, in order to access homeless services, you have to have your mental illness under control, you have to have your substance use under control. So there's a barrier to getting into the housing that you need. And Housing First would say, let's take those barriers away, get you housed, and then it's much easier to start dealing with the other issues. So that's kind of the basis of what we are looking at here. And then people helping people. You'll see on here we have some peer support as part of our staffing of this model. Next slide, please. So again, some of the situations, emergency services in Johnson County, they've seen an increase in the calls. Part of that is related to the CIT training, so the law enforcement are being asked to respond to more situations. And it also is related to some of the mobile crisis services that continue to increase over time. Two costly options, the jail and emergency department. Both are overwhelmed with behavioral health needs, and again, neither one of them are places that you want to be. You really don't receive treatment in either one of those places. You're controlled, but you're not treated. National estimates, again, 50 to 75% of the people in the local emergency departments could be better served elsewhere. So, in addition to there being a case made for this model for the benefit of law enforcement in our communities, there's a huge case to be made just in terms of appropriate humane care for folks. And then other communities have developed these access centers that are quite successful. So the background, we've done a lot of work in Johnson County to reduce that jail population, but in spite of all of those efforts, the jail remains over capacity. The county's spending quite a bit of money to house patients or inmates out of the county. And in addition to that cost, again, if the family wants to visit someone in the jail, there's additional travel time, and those things complicate for the family. Length of stays in the emergency departments, so the behavioral health patients are in the emergency room longer and longer and longer because there's more demand and the resources are not keeping up, so they get housed in the emergency department. They end up with criminal charges that really does nothing to address the mental health or substance use needs. And if you think about someone in a mental health crisis and what they might need, I hope you would envision someplace that's safe, calm, reassuring, That's not how I would describe the emergency department when I visited there. It's none of those.
Nor
it's
the
just-
jail.
nor the jail. Next slide, please. So our proposal options, as we started on this, and I think one of the slides referenced 2010, that's about how long we've been looking at this idea. But we've got a long-term vision of having a sobering unit. And the sobering unit is, think of a harm reduction model. So it's not a place that somebody's going to receive treatment for their use of alcohol or other drugs, but it's a place that they can be safe while they detoxify, while they withdraw from that use. It's an opportunity for us to engage with that person and try to motivate them to move on to something else that is treatment. But this is not treatment. This is harm reduction, giving them a safe place so they're not hurting themselves or hurting someone else. Okay? Detoxification, that steps up into, that would be treatment services. So we're doing some medical services, medical assistance to withdraw somebody. A better term for detoxification now is withdrawal management. So we're managing how they withdraw from their alcohol or drugs. The difference between the crisis observation and stabilization is really in that length of stay. So the crisis observation is where we get a chance to observe somebody for up to 23, 24 hours, so we can do an assessment of what's needed. A lot of times what's needed is a safe place to be, and life is a lot better when sun comes up the next day. We just need that safe environment to rest, get our feet back under us, and get back out on the street. We don't need the emergency department, and we don't need the jail. But then there are other people who maybe they got off their medication, maybe there is an extended situation in their life someplace, so they need a little more time to get that stabilization happening. So that's where we're staying here 5 to 10 days. Low barrier shelter, again, that is a place where there's no questions asked if you need a safe place to be, rather than being out on the street, that we want to make that available to you. Expanded mobile crisis outreach coverage, and the mobile crisis right now is dispatched through the law enforcement can call for mobile crisis, and mobile crisis team is licensed social workers and counselors that go out with the officers to see if they can help resolve the situation. And then medical or urgent care, we really have a vision of having some low-level medical services in this center. So when somebody does have that laceration or that sprain or that abrasion, it doesn't require a trip to the emergency department to get cleared before they come to the access center, but they can come straight into the access. Due to funding, we want to back this up a little bit, looking at 10-bed sobering, the detox, really focusing on that substance use issues, the crisis observation and stabilization, low barrier winter only would be operating, and then the mobile crisis is operating at its current capacity, so we wouldn't envision expanding that right now. And then the 24-hour medical assistance, that would be through telemedicine rather than an on-site physician assistant type position. Next slide, please. So if you think about those services that we want to provide, this slide illustrates some of the staff, the professionals that would be involved in that. So the first column is the daytime hours, and then the evening, and then the overnight. So we wanted to show that the staffing goes down a little bit in the overnight. The peer support, that's somebody with lived experience, either mental health or substance use lived experience. Nurses, emergency medical technicians, law enforcement, security. That's one of the lessons that we learned in visiting the other sites, is that's paramount to have good security available 24/7. So everybody is in a safe position. CADC is a certified alcohol drug counselor, and the LISW is licensed independent social worker. So, you know, a mix of some certified staff dealing with the addictions issues, and then licensed independent social workers. Care coordinator, that is a staff that, if you think back to the earlier models where we had the input and the services and then the output, the care coordinator is about where do we go after we've been at the access center. So we don't want, the idea is that when you come there, we can do an assessment, we can identify what the services are, but then we want to get you hooked up. There's a wealth of services in Johnson County. We want to move you from the access center into those natural supports that are already out there in the community, so you don't continue to come back. If you come back, that's fine, but we want to try to interrupt that. And then the physician assistants and nurse practitioner and telemedicine. Next slide. So this is our initial assessment or initial financials. The top on the revenue, we've got Johnson County, Iowa City, Coralville. That's those are the funds that those communities are currently giving each winter for the low barrier shelter. So we wanted to reflect that contribution from those agencies. North Liberty and the Mobile Crisis, those are funds. The Mobile Crisis is through the East Central Region of Mental Health Disability Services region. So those funds would continue to support the Mobile Crisis that we have in this vision. And then other revenue, we know that we can bill for some services. The detox, crisis observation, stabilization, we can bill third-party payers for that. Our primary target for these payments would be from the Medicaid payers, the Medicaid, the MCOs, managed care organizations that are managing Medicaid in the state of Iowa. The Stover unit has no revenue because that is not a billable service, but we wanted to reflect that as not having that. And then the operating expenses, little over $2 million for personnel, food, and so on. Total operating expense of about $2.4 million. Total revenue of about 2.1. So we end up with a big red $322,000. Okay. We've got some strategies for how we can fill that gap, but we just want to see, on the first blush, where are we at with our income and our expenses. Next slide, please. So capital costs, we have to have some place to operate this. We've worked with architects here in town. Looks like we'll need between 15 and 16,000 square feet, roughly $7 million for that facility to operate this out of. So if you look at the pro forma, the projected annual budget, the first step, we'd have a budget of 2.46, revenue or personnel of 2.1 million. Projected revenue again of about 2.1, so that's that $300,000 gap. When we go to the full vision that I said was really where we want to end up eventually, then we're looking at a projected budget of 3.7 million and a revenue of about 2.1. So the gap gets a little larger as we move into some of those other services. Yeah.
But those capital costs are for the larger version.
Yes. Yeah. They would be. It would be. The vision is to build it so we can grow into it. Yeah. 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 And the capital cost obviously is a one-time expense, and the others are the recurring annual operating expenses. Okay. Next slide, please. We've looked at the option. What would it cost to renovate? What would it cost to build new? About an $800,000 difference. Of course, the biggest disadvantage of renovating is that no matter what you renovate, you always end up with some compromise. When you're building new, the compromise is trying to stay within the budget. But the new construction gives us the option to design the layout the way that we think it would work best for us and how we can maximize the staffing pattern. And what we've seen in the models we visited, if you think about the front door coming into an observation center, kind of a triage center that can be seen for staff in the other units. So you can have a lot of visual observation across units, across services between staff, so you don't end up with staff isolated and having to double up on a position because you can't cover both areas. So that would be a real key for us in trying to design this, is that we have those efficiencies with the staff.
Ron, do you have any idea about where it would be located, or what,
There is some discussion, but it really wouldn't be fair to say what
about
where that's about, because it's very preliminary. And
But primarily Iowa City.
yeah, it looks like it'd be in the Iowa City area. Next slide, please. I think this might be my last one. Yep. Now I get Rick to do the budget stuff.
Okay. This is the justification for the ask portion. So, if you take a look, we took a look at, as far as asking the various jurisdictions to participate in the capital cost. We took out the population of each town, the arrests by different agencies, and plus Johnson County Ambulance Transport, roughly sort of the three ways of taking a look at this. As you look at University Heights with your population, you take a look at the University Heights Police Department, it's essentially all around the same in terms of all these threes. So it's for University Heights for ambulance transport, it's a little bit less than the other entities. So generally, just think you're anywhere from around 1% in terms of the participation in this, depending on how you take a look at it. Next slide. So Johnson County, it's about close to a 6.27 million capital cost, up to 7. Johnson County is being asked 2.5, as is the city of Iowa City. The cities of Coralville and North Liberty together are being asked for $1 million total. And other Johnson County cities are being asked to participate in the remainder of the capital costs. Next slide. And so as far as taking a look at those three, if you divide that by the population, the utilization of ambulance transport, and ambulance visits and law enforcement, University Heights is, yes, a little bit less than 1%, so that's 30,000. That we're asking for the City of University Heights to participate in this group plan. How are we going to pay for it? For information, currently there's a group of elected officials from the three larger cities that I mentioned that are meeting with Johnson County to develop various plans of paying for this. They're taking a look at various bond proposals that could be done in terms of borrowing, and the need is to do it over several years of time. Whether or not the smaller community entities in Johnson County want to participate with the larger cities in those larger bond efforts, or if you want to sort of figure out how to do this on your own. By the way, this is an ask. You won't consider this sort of the bill. You're not going to get a piece of paper. Just as members of the Johnson County community for this effort, we'll be asking all the communities based on this proposal. Next slide. Utilization of relevant services, City of University Heights, like I mentioned before. This is sort of how we took a look at it in terms of we came up with the amount that we asked as a total. Next slide. Questions?
General reception that you have from medical. Well, actually, very, very positive. Everybody's concerned about the dollars, of course, but the concept, the benefit to the law enforcement, benefit to the families and folks we're targeting to serve has been extremely positive.
I think I've heard these issues talked about for the past 10 years. And I think it's wonderful that you're out here with the ask and with the plan and asking for the support.
And legitimately what they're looking at is that I think what the entities, basically the capital costs are a concern, but they're not overwhelming, they're not a burden. The concern, of course, is ongoing costs. And so the reason we showed you the pro forma is that we're about $300,000 short. The idea, and this is the University of Iowa basically is looking at this too, we want this to basically to break even year after year. If that's the issue, then entities don't really have as major a problem putting a one-time capital cost into this. And so that's what we're looking to do. And so that's why the city and the counties are pretty excited about this, because we're very close to getting that done.
What role is Bruce Harold playing? Is he out there helping you, working for you, talking about it?
Not at this point. That's me. I'm sort of Bruce Harold at this point. But he's ready to step in because he's as excited about this as everybody. There is a different political reality for the University of Iowa, if I can sort of step away in my individual role. But the University of Iowa applies to all 99 counties, not just one. And so that's why capital costs are basically something we're asking of Johnson County. Ongoing costs in terms of what this means to a Board of Regents mission are very different. In terms of the health mission and the educational mission, there are very, you could imagine, this is a great place to teach people who are going to go out throughout Iowa. Mm-hmm. This could be replicated throughout Iowa. That does interest the University of Iowa. And that's why the University of Iowa is part of the options that Ron mentioned about taking care of that $300,000 per year deficit that we currently have in the performance.
It would also,
Thanks.
it would also take a huge burden off the university, because I remember being a nurse in psych hospital when patients were dumped at the doorstep because they didn't know what to do with them in the jail. So it's a current and bigger issue even now with the opium and heroin problems and the situations which are much more complex. Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
And you can imagine, Dottie, for every opportunity that I have to ask for funding, the entities like this, I also have those same opportunities in the president's office. So,
Good.
What the annual operating costs you're showing 300,000 plus. Where do you expect to make that up? And would there be an ask for University Heights 3 or 4 years down the road on an annual basis or not?
exactly. mention one of the things in terms of is salary support for professionals. In the staffing, you saw that there will need to be a medical director, a nursing director, and those are things that the university is looking at, hasn't yet decided in terms of having this person be a member of the university professional and P&S staff and faculty to realize some of the help that the university would get this as well. Those are some of the options we're looking at in terms of, and you know how much, I mean, you saw overwhelmingly the operational costs are staff.
Yeah.
And the operational costs for physicians and nurses are usually the larger part of that. That's part of what the university's covering. Other savings?
Yeah. I would say that the revenue is on the conservative side, and we haven't overstated that revenue. We haven't, for example, we don't assume 100% occupancy. I think we're pretty reasonable on the rates, reimbursement rates that we're projected in there. So I think there's some growth possibilities there. Of course, it always go the other direction, but I think that that's a conservative statement. But, you know, as Rick said, the primary solution that we've come up with is how we can, other entities can contribute staffing needs as opposed to having cash out.
I just want to but there's not going to be an annual ask of University Heights. I didn't get a yes or no there. I got a lot of talk, but
The plan is to have no.
okay.
That's why we showed you the pro forma.
Right.
in terms
No,
of
I understand. I just,
the people.
so, I mean, and who assumes responsibility? Johnson County?
Right now, for the operational cost, Johnson County is talking about those things when they like to get together to see the very issue, is they want to make certain. At this point, that $300,000 has to be nailed down to what current.
Yeah, okay.
Currently, one of the big reimbursements is from Medicaid for a lot of these patients. As you know, there are some issues with medical health organizations with Medicaid. One of the things that we're doing at the university is we're donating our lobbyist personnel in Des Moines, basically talking with all 3 MHOs, because of course that's in the interest of rural healthcare as well, but very much so. We're making sure that the kind of revenues that we want to get from the Access Center are going to be intact, irrespective of what happens to the Affordable Care Act, irrespective of what happens in the MHOs. Again, people to the professionals who are in this group, and the people that we have as our lobbyists in Des Moines. We have Jennifer Vermeer, who was the most recent director of the Department of Human Services, Medicaid Enterprises. Thank you. These are the top-notch people. Eventually, yes, you can talk about all the politics you want, but as we know in Iowa, the people who get Medicaid services, eventually, we have a payer for them. And we're going to make sure that the Access Center has access to that payer. There's no way, I mean, the exact name of the payee might change. But I think you can, be sure from all the people who have looked in on this, is that, in perpetuity, Jim, there will be a payer to make sure that pro forma is out.
Yeah, we'll pay one way or another. I understand that,
One way or
yeah.
another, these people-
I just want to make sure it's not like an assessment and that kind of stuff.
And I would say too, in addition to the other entities, the governments that we've talked to being excited, when we've talked with the managed care organizations, they see real cost savings of having somebody come here.
Yeah, oh yeah.
As opposed to the university.
Right.
So
Right.
they get the business behind this, and that's just a place to start with them. I found. Get their attention that way.
Plus the outcomes are plus.
Yep.
Yeah, they're desperate to save money, so things like this,
Yeah.
Good
Wait.
partnerships then.
Is this the only access center in the state? Is there other counties, Polk County?
Has some of these services, they're not centralized in one spot. They've just recently moved to Broadlawns Hospital.
Mhm.
So it's some similarities, but not the central campus that we envisioned here. And that's the only other one that well, there is one down in Atoma that's more of a crisis stabilization type of service.
Would
Down near Atoma.
would people come from other counties also?
Well, yes, and that's one of the pieces that we would need to work out as well. When I mentioned the mental health region
Mhm.
for the crisis, mobile crisis team, the mental health region covers 9 counties. So
I
if they
see.
would be putting funds in, then there would be some expectation that the other counties in that region would have
have some benefits from this. But, you know, we're talking about Dubuque and Johnson County, so it'd be, I believe eventually there would be some other services located closer to those communities as well, but that's just my personal prediction.
That's why for the University of Iowa, you know, as far as we want to replicate this as quickly as possible in the rest of the state. But if they do choose to come here from other jurisdictions far away, they get built.
Yeah.
I
good.
happened to be at the joint entities meeting when the first task force group came back from San Antonio and presented, and I think this is something that's been a long time coming and well needed. I think you guys also picked a good night to come to listen to our bond advisor mention that, you know, we're going to save about $26,000 on a bond issue that, you know, we may have sitting around. Exactly.
Oh, Mary had a question for you in the audience.
So the question was if the VA Medical Center has been involved. They do have a representative.
Yep, Randy Smith, I believe, has been attending our meetings here in the last month. So, yeah, in the last couple of months, we've been able to add some members to our meetings, so it's been helpful. But yeah,
One other, I know that the Salvation Army is kind of a spillover for people who cannot get into the crisis center because of refugees.
can't get into the shelter house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shelter house. Would they be helpful to the discussion too?
They have not been part of our discussion, but I'll sure take that back. Maybe they should
Because
be.
they do need people, you know, from the code, put back out in the streets, but anyway, just a thought.
Yep.
Just as an example, and the issue was does the Salvation Army participate as well in overflow of people in crisis? This is a great idea, Jerry, like you mentioned, and because you don't have an access center, many entities, including a lot of our churches, will participate in taking care of these people. And I think all of us who realize that's just sort of that's probably not the appropriate place to take care of these personnel. You know, we really need to take care of this in the best possible way.
Oh, Larry has a question too for you.
Excuse me, but I wonder if there could be incrementally paid allowing the construction process or maintain the units, whatever. So we would have some money, the full amount of money.
So pay it over a couple of years' time, or a couple of budget cycles.
Spread it out.
Yes, absolutely. So that's what the electric group is taking a look at.
Another exciting part of it, too, is the way that Lonnie Polkropic has jumped in and how they are training the police for a new dimension of interaction.
You know, Chris could probably give a good report on
Yeah.
been through that training.
And that's a real plus to use them in a variety of ways, because they see situations that in the past sometimes they could not deal with because they hadn't been familiarized with them.
And my understanding, you know, also, Ryan, is that the police generally have what they call a command and control sort of methodology, and that does not lend itself efficiently
Right.
or humanistically
Right.
to people with cognitive.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience? The council? Thank you so much, Dr. Dobbins and Mr. Berg.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you so
absolutely.
much for coming. Next order of business is public input. Would anyone from the public like to make a comment or talk to the council about something? Okay, next order of business is One University Place construction report and updates. And Glenn Siders is here tonight, and I know you sent a report. Welcome, Glenn.
As mentioned, my name's Glenn Siders with Siders Development. Jeff isn't going to be able to be here, obviously, this evening. What I wanted to mention is that we're at a point where it looks like we're dormant. If you look at everything from the outside and nothing changes, but I promise you that a lot is happening in the background. Things are going extremely well with the North Building. They've had some curves thrown at them, they've handled the curves very well in our proceeding. There is finished work being done on the interior view towards the east end of the project. On the west end, they're still roughing in and just beginning to drywall and that sort of thing. But things are progressing very well. If you were to ask the contractor if they're on schedule, he would tell you that he's 4 weeks behind. I think what he means by that is he's probably really on schedule. He doesn't want the subs to get too, cocky, but things are going well. I've heard him mention on this facility here, the month of June is a busy month. I believe they're getting 4 or 5 new residential dwellers in here. I'm not sure about that number, but it's somewhere in there. Obviously, you have a new eatery going to be opening up here in the next few weeks. I know they have mentioned other interesting commercial spots. We can't mention any names for confidentiality purposes, but it sounds very promising that there'll be more of those facilities occupied here in the very near future. So things are going real well. I think we're going to see a fall occupancy. Weather's been treating them, notwithstanding 95, but it's been treating them really well. So.
Any questions for Mr. Siders? Thank you so much. Let's see, then we're going to discuss on the agenda's appointment of a representative of the City of University Heights to serve as member of the Board of Directors of One University Place Condominium Owners Association, North and South. And this can be a discussion, or council can make a decision. It can be, Steve, you gave a little bit of a report. Do you want to repeat that a little bit so the public knows? You said it could be appointed by someone on the council, the mayor, or a representative from the public. And I think, well, I'm keep talking, but I keep thinking, you said we could, in this discussion, it was people could submit their names if they're interested. Council could consider that. They could nominate, so this is kind of the beginning of the discussion on what council wants to do going forward with this.
Sure. I'd like to start by making a historical comment as to the origins of this clause. This clause was introduced during the negotiations of the PUD agreement with Jeff Maxwell and the prior council. At that time, I thought that, if we are going to be a city that is participating with ownership of the community space, that we should probably hold a seat on the board of the condominium association. And that purpose of having a seat at the board of the condominium council was to ensure that the city's interests at all times were protected and represented in this very large development unit. It was also ensured that seat would always be a voting seat. So unlike other condominium association or type of structures where you have members who don't get to vote because they are not voting for that particular year, the city would at all times have voting rights in the condominium association committee. So when the PUD was amended to split the property into the north side property and the south side property, that naturally caused that there be 2 condominium associations, meaning that the city now has 2 seats to fill. And I think that would be, that's a logical consequence, a reasonable consequence of that, where Jeff is continuing to honor the intent of having the city represented at the board of both the north and the south side building complexes. So I think it's a good opportunity that we're now getting ready to fill that position. And I'd like Steve to give us a breakdown of the 3 options that he mentioned. And I think let's discuss as a council where we see this one going, because as written right now, I do have some comments I do want to share with the rest of you. especially that, it'd be an indefinite appointment, and the selection process. Those are two issues that I have identified for further discussion. So Steve, take it from there. Let us know, what are the 3 things that you recommended in your legal memo?
So before I touch on those, let me, everything Sylvia said is accurate. I want to maybe specify a couple of other things. The city's right to have a member on the board of directors of each association derives from its ownership of this space that we're sitting in. So if the city ever sells it, that right goes away. The city also is a condominium unit owner, and will be able to vote for other members and could have other people run for election with respect to like at-large seats in the association. So the council has whatever options it would like in terms of how it might solicit people from the public or from the council or both who might want to sit on these boards. The North Board, I don't think is really in place yet, because the condominium isn't done doing anything. But the South Board is. I don't think they're meeting, but they will be. So I just point that out from a timing standpoint. But if the council wants to solicit names and take action that way, if the council wants to appoint one person to both boards, it may do that. If the council wants to appoint different people to each board, the council may do that, or however you want to proceed. I drafted the resolutions just because I was drafting resolutions, I guess, but I didn't really expect that you were going to, probably vote tonight. But that's your prerogative, give some public notice perhaps, and pick some names and decide how you'd like to go about the process.
So let's start off by asking, number one, do we have a South Condominium Board Association right now formed?
Yeah, it is, and I should clarify, both association boards are legal entities. I mean, they're created. My understanding from speaking with the Teresa Morrow, who's kind of handling the property management end of things, right now the board is just, I think, Kevin Munson and Justin Doyle, and I don't think they sit down and have board meetings, but they are required to eventually and soon, in the next foreseeable future. So I don't think there are any ongoing present board meetings as far as I know are scheduled.
That's correct.
Okay, so just it's made up of Justin Doyle and Kevin Monson then.
Well,
and
probably Jeff Maxwell would be my guess. And let me just check something while I'm saying this.
No, I just wanted to shoot the composition of the current board.
Yeah, as is typical of the condominium development, the
Sure.
initial board are going to be the owners.
Right.
Developers.
So do you have a suggestion how you want to proceed, Sylvia?
I do. Well, let's start off by eliminating perpetual indefinite appointment to the position. The way the resolution is written right now is like the Supreme Court of the United States of America until they pass. I think all of us here on council have to go through the rigors of a 2-year cycle where the electorate holds us accountable. I think it's only fair that this position be held accountable every 2 years, concurrent with the election cycle. So if we appoint someone this year, they should be reevaluated or up for reappointment within 2 years. So that gives them good enough time to get their feet wet, get familiar, and track things. The second thing is I'd like to see a nomination process of various members, so an open and transparent process where we submit names and vet those individuals for a number of different factors and discuss them in much the same way that we did that for the selection of the police chief committee. This was the first year that University Heights entertained, including 3 private citizens in its selection process, and I think that was a significant step forward in the right direction of community policing. So I think it makes sense that we have a process around this that's open and that's transparent and with discussion. What do you all think?
I don't have any problem asking who wants to apply and doing it through an open process. That makes perfect sense to me.
And I think limiting the term is very wise. A 2-year term.
I think it's hard to make any decisions or engender any interest without knowing more about how the board is going to operate, how often it's going to meet, what the makeup is, and
Mm-hmm.
what the
Sure.
board now is thinking of in terms of moving forward. Without that information, it's tough to think about it, at least for me. I'm not that smart. So I would like to get that input before making any decision or eliciting any interest from residents, because we don't know what to be interested in.
So can we get a summary description drafted? Perhaps, Madam Mayor, you can take a stab at it?
Sure.
Summary description of what?
What does it mean to be a city board member representative?
Well, I thought Jerry was asking, what does it mean this HOA board is going to do?
Right, well, that's going to be part of the functions of the representative sitting on that.
I think Morrow, the manager,
Yeah, Teresa Morrow.
she knows what
I've gotten emails from her.
inform us about how they plan to proceed.
Right.
Obviously have a plan.
Sure.
Obviously. Mhm.
So I'll find out what the plan is, get that information back to you, and do you want to ask citizens too if they want to
Sure.
participate? I mean, just interest.
Right.
Well, they'll have to see what the duties would be and the time involvement, but maybe.
Right. And I think that's a fair collection of data. What's the commitment involved?
Well, I just have a question. Having been on a condominium board, there are some serious interests, personal interests that one has to make, And here, a citizen would be responsible for the city's decision. So would they then, I think we need a process, because then would that person come back to council? How would that be handled by council? Because it would be more than one person deciding at a condo meeting. Because someone like an owner of a business is in a different position than a member of the city, representing the city.
And I think conflicts is a
Yeah,
very
conflict
good
would be
comment that
big.
you're making,
Mhm.
although you're not calling it, but it is. I think we,
Mhm.
and I think, we should open up this vetting process to counselors if they're interested in applying for the position concurrent with being
Mhm.
counselor on council. I don't see a problem with that.
I think you might want it to be a council.
Because the decisions are going to be pretty huge. If the individual can't make them, then,
I don't think they combined the city, and I think that needs to be clarified in the, in the job scope. No, not a board, not a board, the city's representative. Well,
It would be the person appointed would be a member of the board, right?
so they would be
Right.
Yeah.
passing
I think so.
voting authority.
yeah,
I mean, unless you.
Mhm.
A voting member of the board.
Right.
yeah.
That's right, okay. So then I think that has to be evaluated,
Mhm.
or very much the same way that we have restricted the discretion of the city engineer to make adjustments and changes to the PUD agreement for Jeff Maxwell. Because if you all recall, there was a historical issue where a legitimate concern was raised that an engineering decision could pass off as a substantial material change to the contract. And that needed to come back because it was a policy consideration that belonged appropriately with the council and not through the city engineer. So guidelines were established for the city engineer so that he would not be providing policy decisions, but rather just engineering decisions. So I think, if we start thinking about this and coming up with a job scope of guidelines, I think we can provide some good contours and parameters.
Okay, so I'll work on that and get it back to you. And
I want to concur with Sylvia's 2-year
okay.
moratorium on the, I mean, not moratorium, but that's the next item.
Yeah.
Anyway, 2 years
2-year moratoriums, Jim.
or a 2-year term, and then either revote or, reappoint or whatever we want to do.
And I would suggest, so what the current, the draft version of the resolution says is that the person would be appointed until further action of the council. And I would suggest that if you specify, 2 years or whatever time you might specify, I would suggest that you say 2 years or until further action of the council. I wouldn't want to vest, my advice would be not to vest the person with, well, I'm the representative for 2 years. Because if the person goes off the rails in the council's mind and the council wants to pull
Yeah,
them back,
that's
then
a good
the council
point.
should have the
Right.
right to do that.
Well, I think that's why it's going to be important to have guidelines so that you don't wait 24 months as a council body, to
Yeah, no, I think
to rein
both
in
of those are
an
good.
agent.
Yeah.
Essentially, they're an agent on
Yeah.
behalf of the city.
Okay, very good.
for the benefit of the fellow councilors, I am willing to do this. So I just put my name in the hat there. Thank you.
No. So we avoided the 1, 2, 3, not it.
Okay. Okay, we'll find out some guidelines and go from there.
Yeah, maybe I won't be, but at this point I am.
Okay. Then, now Josiah, we have here the permeable paver of OUP with the north parking.
Yep.
That was in your report, and we have it now. It was a nice drawing and everything. It was easy. And I like the picture, too, of
There it
North
is.
Liberties. That was, there it is. I forget we have this great
Well-
screen.
Would you like me to summarize
Yes.
Yes.
that? Okay. So the picture on the screen is a picture of permeable pavers in a parking lot installed earlier this year. So the request from the developer for the OUP site was to make a change to add a bay of parking here in the middle parking lot on the north side. So it'd be the row right in front of this north building they're working on. So as I noted in my report there, it essentially, I think, touches three things. Parking is the first one, obviously. They add 27 spaces with this additional bay of parking. That puts them at 102. The allowable amount of above ground parking in the PUD was 108. It affects stormwater because they're adding the parking in the only spot they have, which is where the biocell was placed in the original design. So thus the picture of the permeable pavers. The proposal is to build the parking bays with permeable pavers. They're a similar stormwater management practice to biocells. The biocells, obviously, the water runs off the parking lot and down into them. The permeable pavers catch it as it's coming into the paver areas. They drain through. From my perspective, the big thing was, do the permeable pavers that they're proposing treat water to the same design standard that the biocell was designed? And after reviewing the calcs and the areas and the depths, they do. Both the biocell that was originally proposed and these permeable pavers capture the water from what I noted in there is the water quality volume, which the design standard was how do we design something without over designing it? And there were studies that found that the 1.25 inch rainfall in Iowa is like 90% of all the rainfall. So that's the standard. So they both meet that, and they both exceed that actually. The last thing would obviously be the landscaping. The change that I highlighted in the drawing was that there's still 10 trees, but 6 of them were converted to aspen instead of elm. So those are the same trees that were out in the front of the south building here, and I believe that was done because of the shape of them, and they're closer to the north building. All the plants that were in the biocell are gone because they've they've been replaced by the pavers. So those are the three components of the change, and the short and the long of it, I guess, what the impacts are.
So Josiah and I discussed this along with Glenn and felt like this was a minor change, but it's still significant to review with the council. So we just wanted to update the council on what we were going to do there. So if there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer those.
So they're going to decrease the bioswale in order to make parking spaces
They're not going to decrease it, they're going to eliminate it.
altogether?
The north biocell. Yeah.
Mhm.
So there was two. There's the one that's out there now in the middle. That's obviously in place. There was going to be another one that mirrored it on the north side.
And is the
That's where the row parking is now.
right?
Yeah.
And part of the issue why we had the bioswale was in order to manage water runoff, right?
Yeah.
So are the permeable pavers doing a comparable, if not similar job to managing that water runoff?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, same capacity, 10 units being managed?
Yeah. And both the biocell originally and the permeable pavers are actually above the design standard. So they're going to capture more than they need to.
All right, I guess I feel comfortable knowing that the objective of why we went with the bioswale was for better water
Yeah.
runoff management, and if we're still ending up with the same conclusion,
Right.
I think that's a fair.
Yeah, Josiah's original concern was the trees and what they were doing there, and we've got that answered now too with the new trees. So that's,
All right,
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. No other questions. We'll go to mayor's report, and I submitted a written mayor's report, and there's copies over there. And if you have any questions, you can ask me. We'll go to Stan Loverman came in, and there you are, Stan. And welcome, Stan. And you're going to give a housing inspector report at this meeting and talk about some rental changes, possibly.
Hello.
Hi.
Dan.
So it's been this past month has been the month of tall grass and weed complaints. So there's about 10 properties that I've had interactions with, off and on. Thing is that when I get involved, if they do get mowed, they probably don't look as pristine as we would want, but they comply with, the minimum standard of the code. So, but we'll keep on them and make sure that they stay in compliance. And I would encourage people to email or let me know if they see properties that they're having issues with. People are usually pretty compliant once you knock on their door and make sure they're okay, what's going on, and they get it taken care of. So, occupancy is probably a big question of how to regulate occupancy. We're spending a lot of time. I'm the senior housing inspector at Iowa City. We're spending a lot of time on it there. We're getting some direction and ideas put together. This evening I forwarded you all the Iowa City Council packet information and the presentation that was made at the work session last Tuesday night, including the City Channel 4 video of city manager kind of going through the points of how to address it. So very broad strokes. So there's a lot of work being put into that in Iowa City, and there's a lot that we can use in University Heights along with it. So kind of in a holding pattern as far as bringing you anything, but in the next 3 months you'll see stuff flow through Iowa City, and we'll take what's good and we can use in New Heights and use that here.
I imagine you don't want to discuss it publicly.
Tip our hand in any way, At a certain point, I'll sit down with Steve and kind of, fill him in on some of the thought process so he can start wrapping his mind around it and seeing how it all fits in with how our ordinances are written and, some of the direction that we could consider and see what he has to say.
At this point in time, if we are landlords and negotiating a new lease, would it be your professional advice that we just replicate the same lease that we've had before with
The
the,
law of the land, as far as occupancy, does not change until January 1st, 2018. So I would remain in compliance with that occupancy standard
and
until it changes.
until it, all the feathers fly in
That's right.
January.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in the meantime, you can still bump out homes in anticipation of bringing in more occupants January 5th of 2018, right?
You can do what?
You can bump out a home, do a renovation, add 2 more rooms that you expect
Oh,
to
but if
rent
you're
out.
planning on not renovating,
No,
is what
this
I'm
is keep
saying.
renovating. I'm asking Stan that right now, you said under the law of the land, or at least
Mhm.
Stan did, that it's a possibility to have a permit issued for building sometime between now and the end of the year in
Yeah,
anticipation of more people coming in to occupy a home.
Due to issues that were happening in Iowa City, where you had landlords who were applying for building permits to substantially alter rental properties in Iowa City, the city council of Iowa City passed a moratorium on new building permits in rental properties, anything that would expand a rental property in Iowa City, in the low density zones. And they've also put a moratorium on additional, rental permits within their moratorium zone. And that was based off of what they were seeing for activity.
And did you check with our building inspector about our activity?
Yeah, we have not seen any activity, like we were seeing in Iowa City.
How many rental permits do we have out right now?
191 was a report.
It's in the clerk's report. that said
191 on-
that, yeah.
197, but then you take out Grandview Court of
Maybe quote was about 90.
Yeah, there it is. Oh, good job, right away.
91, yeah. So, I mean, you're looking at 100 and some single families with rental permits.
It would seem to me that we, given our building permit activity is low, and given the fact that I would think our landlords would be delighted just to be able to rent to the number of bedrooms they have, I don't see anybody necessarily. I don't see our landlords doing the same thing as some Iowa City landlords immediately, just because we've been so restrictive that what has happened for a lot of people is you own a 5-bedroom house and I can rent to 2 unrelated people.
And I would say it's a legislative decision. I would
Sure.
say we haven't seen a sizable increase in demand for rental permits
Mhm.
at this point. Doesn't mean we won't. We haven't seen an increase in building permits. Doesn't say you won't.
Right.
I mean, that's the data you have.
Right.
And that's a decision a legislative decision that you will have to make.
Stan, what percentage of those rentals are in violation of that ordinance?
What section of the ordinance?
I mean, the number of family,
Of occupancy?
related parties.
Depends on the day, and depends on who you talk to. I mean, I think,
Give me a range of percentages, you know.
I would say at any given time, you probably have 10 houses that have occupancy levels that are over what they should be.
So about 10%.
That's 5%.
I mean,
5%.
Grandview Court, you're not seeing it, but in your single-family homes, yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing it. It's
Only 10%?
Only 10%? Yeah, I mean, if you drive around, I think you pick out the homes that are occupied by families and, you know, yeah, there's other homes that have, you know, higher occupancies and that I think people even know about, but if people aren't causing trouble, they're not really being brought to anybody's attention.
So they're underreporting. Mm-hmm.
And the other thing, I mean, beyond doing a massive, you know, addition to homes in University Heights, there's not a lot of properties where you could build within the structure. Most of those have been built out to what they are already. So.
Any more questions for Stan?
So if you're standing up here, Stan, and we have a potential moratorium on our agenda tonight, would you recommend this is something we need to do right now?
I've given that some thought, and I think I think my role at this point should be provide you. You can do it.
Way to dodge the policy question, Stan. Nice work.
You know, Stan did serve on city council for a number of years, so he knows.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Stan, since you do have the privilege of working for another municipality, who I won't mention, so that we can, continue the nice diplomacy here. This is a much larger municipality, and they're still reviewing and considering their options, right? And the moratorium that they passed was for, I think, 6 months, to give them 6 months, right? Realistically, of those 6 months, how many months do you think they'll really use to turn around a final conclusion to their review and study?
Honestly, we'll probably spend the next 3 months, just because of time of year developing what we want to do and what we can present, and give that city council 3 months to work through the process, because there'll be building code issues that will require hearings by different boards that will have to come before city council. So, along with housing code issues that will need to be addressed, staffing issues.
And then public awareness and public education.
Yeah, I mean, that'll go hopefully hand in hand.
Okay. Okay. And you think approximately 3 months or so?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the time of year, it's June and July and August, which is historically time that a lot of us take vacation. So working around staffing issues and availability of time, it just takes some time to do the research. I mean, we have some ideas, but to flesh those out
takes time and coordination.
Yeah.
Yep.
The more time you can spend up front on it, the better.
Up front, I like that. Okay. I think, yeah.
Any other questions for Stan? Thank you so much, Stan, for your report. Sylvia, did you want to talk about consideration of resolution enacting a 9-month moratorium on the issuance of new rental permits and building permits that result in an enlargement of a rental dwelling to R1 zones to allow the city council time to consider certain changes to city ordinances?
Okay, sure. I just want us to, this resolution 1728 really took me down to memory lane about 3 years ago, when at 7:03 or 7:05 in the morning, I got a call from a resident who's on Kozer, and this resident on Kozer was just giving me an earful of the construction that was taking place 5 feet away from his property line. And he wanted the building inspector out there to make sure that what was getting built on was accurate and no pun intended, but kosher, Kozer. But so it was just really quite an eye-opening experience to go through early in the morning for the next several days, trying to understand how a rather large structure could be built so close to another proximity of someone else's property, and creating such community chaos between neighbors. There were certain expectations on one side, expectations on the other, and at the end of the day, what came about was a revision of the zoning ordinance for University Heights. And it was a very good beginning to the process of reviewing what otherwise has been a historically left alone, not revisited ordinance. And that was under the good work and leadership of Pat Yagi and the zoning commission at the time. So kudos to them for taking on the charge and lead. And tonight's moratorium for 1728 is pretty much along those lines, and that is to provide city council with just enough time to consider the implications and consequences of changes in the state legislature that impact local control and local authority over this important issue about rentals. For a number of different reasons, I think all of us have heard from different residents and renters and non-renters all sorts of comments. And I think that the proposed moratorium resolution 1728, the intent is to solely allow time for this council to think through some considerations as to where we're going as a community on rental occupancy and bump outs that occur as a result of you know, having to adjust to those new standards of rental occupancy. So I modeled the ordinance to another municipality that this city body has often looked to for guidance. And they had a 6-month moratorium that they just enacted this past week. And so I figured, well, why don't we follow suit with 6 months and then give ourselves 90 days if we need it to, you know, consider University Heights situation and get our act together as a city council. So the intent here is limited solely to building permits that would change or modify or create the alteration of a structure with a house in University Heights to accommodate this new law that comes into effect in January. And it would also stop or restrict the issuance of new rental permits, which could just as easily result in over occupancy and many of the other issues that we still have to address. It does not disturb, it does not bother any of the existing 100 or so, 100, is it 198? Yeah, 198 rental permits that are on the books. They're essentially grandfathered until this council body announces guidelines and new ordinances. As you heard tonight from the inspector, this is going to be a comprehensive process. We're all going to have to entertain building code changes, housing code changes, staffing issues, and of course, public awareness and public education on this. And July is the time that the city has historically sent out its permit renewal forms, which is next month. And we haven't even considered an alert to say we will be addressing this issue one way or the other. We haven't done anything. And so this moratorium buys the time that the council needs to sit down and think. We can discuss whether you think the time is appropriate from 9 months to 6 months to 3, but it buys you the time that should go into considering this very important issue so that on January 1st, 2018, this council body is not flat-footed because it failed to take into consideration planning time. So that's why the moratorium is before you tonight. It's gone through Steve Ballard's review, and I think he circulated. Steve, can you walk us through what changes or comments you have, especially whether this is a defendable moratorium, in case any of the councilors are concerned that it may be questionable?
So the only changes that I made to what you prepared, Sylvia, was to clarify that like the phrase "new rental permit" means a permit that would apply to any dwelling that doesn't have, a current valid rental permit. I think it's defensible. For most properties that are rental properties, I don't think this is going to impact them really at all. Obviously, it would if they wanted to enlarge the area. So that possibility, but I don't see that as a big. I don't see that as a big factor based on what Stan has said, and I've talked to Terry about it. People are going to renew their rental permits. For the next 6 months, the occupancy restriction remains in place, and so how they choose, in terms of the question of somebody asking what should I do, what they should be told is they should talk to their lawyer, because that's their decision. But they have 6 months where nothing changes, and then there's a change. The risk is, and I don't know how to assess it. Don't know. But the risk is that somebody bought a home that's not now a rental home or rental property, and they've either closed or they're going to close in the next couple of weeks, and they're all excited to have a rental home in University Heights and they're expecting cash flow and they've got tenants lined up and the whole thing, they're not going to get a rental permit. Is it defensible? Yeah. But people are going to be, if that happens, I think you're going to hear about it.
And point of clarification, I've already received one for FY17. So is that now not a valid rental permit if this goes into effect?
You received an application for.
I have a rental permit and check.
For a new property or an existing property that's renewing?
It's on Golfview. I can't remember if it's new or existing. I would have to look.
That's the key. I mean, if it's existing, this doesn't do anything to it.
But if it's new, then do I need to call the person back and say it's not valid even though you gave it to me to hold until?
Well, the moratorium hasn't been adopted yet. I think I would have to know more about what the normal process is. I mean, if they've made the application before the moratorium is enacted, and all that would remain would be the processing of the application and issuing the permit. I don't know. I'd have to know more.
Okay.
You're not taking a position on this ordinance, I take it.
I think, as I said, I think it's defensible. I think the council has an ability to say we need some time.
It's defensible. You're not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing.
I guess, yeah, that's true.
If we exceed the state law after January 1, 2018, you still think it's defensible?
Well, I mean, we can't enforce. So when you say exceed the state law, if the council, and I know you're not saying this, but if the council says we're going to keep enforcing our occupancy restriction based upon familial status, you can't. The council's going to be in trouble. The city's going to be in trouble. Can't do that. But the fact that this moratorium, as written, extends out beyond that date, I don't think that's a magic date. I think Iowa City. I mean, I haven't spoken with anybody there, but my sense is that, and I think they said this in their preamble, maybe, that they dovetailed the ending of their moratorium with the change in the
Right.
state law. But I don't really see the significance of that, to tell you the truth.
I would think that by January 1, we would need, as a council body, to have had already codified by 3 readings ordinance changes, or collapse them with a 3rd reading by December, so that they are in effect January 2nd, or January.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
So if there's any modification to the moratorium in order to make that consistent and actually put the pressure on council to really perform, I'm all for it. We can change it from 9 months to 6 months to make it consistent with the close of the calendar year, and also happens to be the last time that you have a 3rd time collapsed reading opportunity for any changes in order to be ready come January 1, 2018.
I mean, that's obvious we need to work on this issue. I just don't think we need to go to the steps of a moratorium just because we haven't seen. I mean, I look at the 8 building permits we've had this year so far. I just don't. Having gone through the moratorium before and having extended it twice, I just don't see a need in this case to go through those same steps. I think we can get through all of our changes into how we want to make a rental code that protects the community and is still within state guidelines. I think that's where our focus ought to be. I don't know that having a rental permit moratorium and a building permit moratorium necessarily slows down or stops anything. So.
Pat Bauer, I know Building and Zoning have been looking at all these setbacks and all these other types of things in relation to extensions and those of buildings themselves. And some people have said to me the setbacks stop this from a whole lot of expansion on many of the buildings in town. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't think they do. I think one of the things we'll be bringing to you is a change from setbacks to building coverage. And I went through and manually calculated building coverage of every single family residence in town. And
bump up, she said.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's more my concern, is up rather than out, so.
Yeah, and that's, just 3 years ago, that bump up was exactly the scenario that was placed, and
Yep.
it hadn't been calculated or projected by the data at that time. There was no data. It was just a phone call. This is happening now. What does the ordinance say, and how can you protect my right as a neighbor, and how is this going to impact the community at large if you all don't get busy? I said, I don't have an answer for you. I'm going to call the building inspector and I'll get back to you. So that's the only motivation behind this moratorium. It's a tool that it should not be used lightly. It's a tool that should only be used for protection, that in order to protect against consequences that you really can't undo once they're in place. You can't make somebody unconstruct a bump out. That's the only take I took on this, was you really can't stop them from building extra rooms for more living space for more occupants.
So the only thing this would not cover, I'm just trying to understand, is if someone had a current owner-occupied house and they decided they're going to turn this into a rental, and they're going to go ahead and bump up or bump out either way. So, I mean, this would not cover that. And I don't know any way.
You mean like if JP
Well-
and I wanted to turn our home into a rental?
Yeah, and it isn't a rental now.
It's not a rental now, so under the rule, you're a brand new renter, a rental, brand new landlord.
No, but
property.
you're applying for a building permit
Oh,
for a current owner-occupied
no,
building.
owner occupied, no.
Yeah.
If you're owner occupied.
So I'm just saying what this doesn't
Needs
cover.
an extra room.
And
no.
I don't know how, I think it's rare.
Completely
but-
unrelated, a year later, you decide to make it a rental.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah.
And you said it doesn't cover that, right?
Yeah, and I'm just understanding where
Me too.
where the exceptions are. I don't have a particular opinion on that. That's just going to
And-
happen,
and
and
just to
you can't
clarify-
do everything.
Procedurally, Steve, help me out here, but I'd like to amend, not even, well, can I amend? I proposed this moratorium to December 31st, 2017, just so that there's more certainty at this council table, that by December 31st, 2017, this moratorium lifts.
Yeah, I think when you move adoption, you can just make that clarification.
Yeah.
Okay,
Chris
so
can-
that's,
Chris can change the.
okay, so clarified, so clarified. Do I need a second? Or can it just be clarified?
Are you okay with that, Steve?
Well, has there been a motion to?
Yeah, is there a motion to adopt
I'm
the?
assuming, Sylvia, you just made a first.
I made a motion to amend.
We have to,
Well,
we
Okay,
make
got
a
it.
motion
Okay,
to adopt.
I'll make a
To
motion to
adopt.
adopt.
And I'll second that.
And I think you can just say as a part of your motion to adopt 1728 with the change, just what's printed to expire December 31, 2017.
As
Exactly
stated by
Steve
s-
stated.
Okay.
And you second that, Dottie?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a motion and second for 1728. Discussion, further discussion?
I will vote against this moratorium. I don't think it's necessary. I think it protects very few people, and there's some inconsistencies in my mind in a council that distinguishes between commercial development and people who want to earn money on renting properties.
Mm.
And I understand there's a practical difference in the impact on neighbors, but what this council, I think, needs to do is to take a visioning approach towards how it wants to grow commercially, how it wants to allow rentals to grow, to put adequate limits on commercialization, but a planned approach. Ad hoc approach to commercialization or rental is not an approach that's going to be in the best interests, I don't think, in the long term, though some will think that the invisible hand is going to take its course no matter what. I don't. I think we should, as a council, even have a visioning project, as we did with the streets and highways, to talk about how we want to see this community commercialized, where we want to see rental properties, if we can do something like that, and then invite people in to help us do what we vision, not proceed in the ad hoc fashion that we are likely to proceed in otherwise. So I will vote against this.
Any other discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
Casada,
Aye.
Haverkamp,
No.
Lane,
Aye.
Maher,
Aye.
Zimmerman.
Carries. That's what you have to say.
Sorry, I was doing.
No, there was the motion itself.
That was Resolution 1721, first
28.
reading.
Yep.
Only reading. Only reading.
And you're right, it does carry.
3-2.
Is someone going to contact Terry Gerd, or would you like me to do that, or how would you like to proceed?
I think Stan is luckily still here, so Stan will contact Terry for us. Will you, Stan? Thank you. Okay, so we'll go to the Zoning Commission report. Pat Bowers here. Thanks, Pat. Welcome.
I wanted to thank Clerk Anderson for getting the minutes of last Tuesday's meeting out to all of you, and also accordingly speak very briefly about that. Those minutes were distributed to you. We have, at Tuesday's meeting, we kind of finished up the last of 5 statute of ordinances that we've been working on for since last summer. And Mayor Fromm sent out a save the date. She indicated that next Tuesday at 7:15 had been a time that you'd set aside that was now available for a work session. 3 of the 5 zoning commissioners will be there, but this has been very much a consensus process. And what we'd like to do is walk through those 5 things and try to explain to you why it is that we think that would be sensible things for the city of University High School. I will get those out to you by the end of the day tomorrow, first thing Thursday. I still have a few outstanding tweaks. As soon as I get them all public, get those out to you along with the covering memo, as well as some supporting information which you needn't read in its entirety, but it will be there. The other thing we did was get started on the University Lake Partners proposal. And it was very much kind of a preliminary discussion in which members of the zoning commission identified for the developer the concerns they have that they would want to have addressed as that development becomes more developed, proposal becomes more developed. We, as the minutes indicate, we're in a position to fast track this if that's consistent with the developer's capacity to keep up with that schedule. NPOJC is doing a traffic report on the access issue at the north end of the property, which I think we saw as kind of a linchpin. If that doesn't fly, then nothing else will. But assuming that something there is manageable, then an intermediate meeting in July with something more like the OUP PUD plan with some elevations and foreground and whatnot. And then again, assuming that NPOJC is capable of turning around and getting us a full 10, 12-page report of the sort they did for OUP, we would be in a position, I'm not sure about the exact date, but early in August to have taken final action. There would be notice to, mailed notice to everyone in town around the 4th of July if we hold to this schedule. So 3 meetings to come. We've been trying to economize and have been meeting without a city attorney or a city engineer. But my suggestion would be that, given the complexity of this proposal, we just ask kind of council's permission to see, to the extent they're available, have the city engineer and the city attorney attend those meetings.
That makes a lot of
Question.
sense.
The main things then required from the developer still is the MPOJC reports. Is that it?
What they, again, it's up on the website as an attachment to our agenda, but their proposal is relatively bare bones. And I think what they heard from the commission is we would need to have something more detailed, both to allow Steve to draft the kind of implementing ordinance that would be necessary to permit this to go forward, as well as to provide MPOJC with the kind of foundation they would need to do the kind of compatibility analysis with surrounding properties and uses and whatnot. So, there is a proposal out there, but it's, as I say, it's relatively bare bones at this point.
Did they indicate they'd have any problem doing this, or did they?
No,
Steve is acting as the contact person from them, and they seem to be appreciative of our ability to move things along. It won't be within the 45 days, but relatively soon thereafter, as such things go.
Yeah, that's right. I haven't talked to him since the meeting, but at the meeting, they indicated that they were very agreeable to working with the commission, timing, whatever, so I don't see any issues from their standpoint from what they told me.
Okay.
You could forward them my emails to you guys, because I think I did not, I sent something to the mayor and the city attorney with expectation would be forwarded to.
Oh, well, it was to Steve, and he was the communication.
Steve and I had a conversation, and we agreed that he should be the contact person,
Right.
stay out of that.
So what do we need to forward?
Those two emails that he sent,
Okay.
June 10th,
Oh, right. Okay.
just came, I think it was,
Last Thursday, I think.
yeah, I think it was, a few days ago. Let me think. So we're going to have a work session next Tuesday at 7:15, and 3 of the commission members are going to be there. And you're going to go over what work you've done and review that with the council. And I thought, and I'm kind of saying this to the council too, I might make it possibly a special meeting just in case something would come up that council would need to make a decision on. I don't know if that's okay with council. I mean,
Yeah, that's fine. Originally, Josiah and I thought we might have to try to pay a bill, but
you don't have to now?
we don't have to.
Oh,
I have
okay.
a bill to submit in this fiscal year, so I wanted to ask for how I can do that so that it doesn't get charged to the 2017
There you go.
farmer's market.
We can take it up at the 20th, can't we?
Yeah, we can do that at the 20th.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And then so I'll make it a work session special meeting in case, because things have popped up, but luckily not too many now.
I think part of from our end, would be talking through the 5 proposals, but also getting some sense of you about the process that you think would be appropriate. Whether we should be notifying everyone in town by mail, whether there should be, August, September.
Right, okay.
Because to the extent it includes things like building coverage, it potentially impacts everything.
Right.
Because of the
Good point.
significance of the discussion, I'd like to propose that we secure videotaping of this special session or working session, just so that we have it on tape.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Pat. Well, to tie that along with Pat Bauer said, we have consideration of Resolution 1727, authorizing the mayor to sign and the clerk to attest the agreement with University Lake Partners LLC, Jim Glasgow and Greg Stiltner, providing for the reimbursement of the city's reasonable professional and clerical fees and expenses related to consideration of a development proposal for 901 Melrose Avenue.
I move adoption of Resolution 1727.
Second.
I'll second.
Motion by Jim, second by Dottie. Discussion. Roll call vote.
Haverkamp.
Aye.
Lane.
Aye.
Maher.
Aye.
Zimmerman.
I, but no one should make this have anybody think there's any reliance interests for either party based on this. This is just, they're paying us for professional services and with no implications at all. I vote aye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Casada.
I think it makes common sense that the city get reimbursed. We did that historically for a number of other developers, and I think why should we be giving away free legal services? So
Is
I'm
that an
voting in
aye?
favor. Yeah, long one.
Carried.
Okay, thank you. Next, Steve Ballard's going to give the legal report.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add from my written report. Just what's on the agenda, I think, is all I wanted to go through. So the first thing is the first consideration of Ordinance 206. And I sent around the revised proposed ordinance. I think I didn't understand what the tree board was telling me, and I was a little ambitious in what I said. I think I was requiring all the ash trees in the city to be removed, which I thought that's what they wanted. Turns out not. So it's
Just like Dutch elm.
Yeah. So the proposed ordinance 206 before you adds, dead ash trees to the ordinance 31, which declares certain trees, Dutch elm, nuisances and requires them to be removed and gives the council an ability to cause them to be removed and tax the cost to the homeowner. That's what the ordinance says. A question did arise about dead trees that are in the parking area in the city right of way, and what the code says is that dead wood, that's the phrase, on city property, and the city's required to remove it. In the past, what the city has done, if something is just flat out dead, the city has paid for it to be removed. If it's in the process of dying, historically what the city has done is worked something out with the property owner where the costs are usually shared evenly. And that's been the practice. That's not in the ordinance. As I said to Jan Leff when she was on the council once, I said I've always wanted to quote this, and I said it's not that the tree is merely dead, it's really insincere. And so if it's not dead, it's not dead. I think the city could take that position. I think it's a better position to say, let's share the cost, but that's the ordinance that's before you.
I move adoption of Ordinance 206 with a great Wizard of Oz reference there, Steve. Nice.
Motion by Mike, second by Jerry. Discussion. Roll call vote.
Lane.
Aye.
Maher.
Aye.
Zimmerman. Casada.
Aye.
Haverkamp.
Aye.
Carried.
And Virginia Miller and the tree board, and she's the chair of the tree board, has a handout flyer that she and the tree board have prepared and will go out in the next, there's no, emergency situation right now, but it'll go out in the next month or so. And this explains this, and it explains right away tree issues and on private citizens' property, and beginning to identify if you do have ash trees, that type of thing. Anyway, it's very well done. So that'll be coming.
Yeah, and I might add, and this might be in what Virginia sends, but when I talked with Virginia today, and I think the source of my misunderstanding, this effort this really isn't an emerald ash borer effort, which is what I guess I assumed it was. It's a safety issue. If you have a dead ash tree, it could be a safety, and that's why we want to get them out of there. Right. So it's not a matter of whether there's ash borer infestation or presence or that sort of thing. So
I thought because it would, contaminate More trees.
I would encourage you to talk to
Everywhere's
Virginia.
infested.
'Cause that's
I
kinda
figured you don't want an infested tree lingering in the property too.
It's going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
The bigger issue is that the way it damages, it becomes weak and it's much more expensive to remove and it's much more dangerous to remove if it's completely dead.
Oh, because
That's-
you can't climb up too. Yeah.
And the limbs shatter
Mhm.
when they drop.
Wow.
So
Yeah, safety.
it's a mess.
Okay, Steve, you have some transit issues?
Yeah, so Resolution 1725 is a renewal of the 2080 agreement with the city of, the city of Iowa City for the provision of transit services at a rate of $37,622. Represents a cost of living increase 2% over last year.
I move adoption of Resolution 1725.
I second.
Motion by Mike, second by Sylvia. Discussion? Roll call vote.
Maher,
Discussion, hold on.
Discussion, you have
I have a
discussion?
question to ask. How are we doing with the experience? Because I know we had switched to a different formula for,
This is the next, that's the next resolution. That's seats.
Yeah,
This is the
This
bus.
is the bus.
bus.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Sorry about that. Okay, roll call vote.
Maher,
Aye.
Zimmerman, Casada,
Aye.
Haverkamp,
Aye.
Lane,
All right,
carried.
So the next item on your agenda is Resolution 1726. This is the seats renewal, and I don't have ridership data. I know that Brad Newman, who coordinates this for the MPOGC, indicated that it was still to the city's advantage
Well,
to keep the $25 per ride.
and you just sent us something in the treasurer's reports, Lori, that the city refunded us money back because we'd had so few rides lately that money we had paid them we haven't been using. So I think it certainly has been to our advantage. That could change, but yeah, that they rebated back because they couldn't carry it at the end of their budget year. So we're doing well. We've saved a lot of money. I'd move adoption of Resolution 1726.
and I'll still second.
Okay, motion by Mike, second by Sylvia.
yeah, just information, Sylvia, I think we budgeted 8,000, and we may not get to 1,000 this year.
Yeah, I just wanted to know like how we were doing with experience, and I think Mike's comment about
Yeah.
we're not using it as often.
Yeah,
Right.
Lori said there were 4 in May.
Yeah.
In May.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
fabulous. I'm just glad that the city offers this opportunity to our residents, and that Iowa City is interested in sharing that, cost-sharing that transportation with us.
Okay, any other comments? Roll call vote.
Zimmerman, Casada,
Aye.
Haverkamp,
Aye.
Lane,
All right,
Maher,
Aye.
carried.
City clerk report. Chris, I think we looked at it for a minute there.
We did. And we had Stan reporting, so it was a short report, clerk report, but sent out the building permits, which you also looked at, and the rental permits have not changed. And I will be working on getting the mailing out, have met with Stan already, and working on drafting a few changes to the brochure, which I will have Louise look at as chair of the committee, and then we'll get those printed and sent out.
Can I request two things? One is the website needs to have an updated spreadsheet, I believe, of rental permits, the hyperlink.
I send that to Mike.
Okay,
I usually update that in January and then again in June.
okay.
So I
it's not
typically do
monthly?
it. I typically do it twice a year because it isn't that big. There aren't that many changes typically.
Okay.
So.
And then the second request is, can you submit a copy of the rental permit brochure? I think it's good for council to be aware of what information is being distributed to.
There are copies out front in our hangar if they want to look at them right now. Also, the permit itself, and I will be putting the new ones there once they're printed. As
Super. Thank you.
those are for Citizens Council and anyone else who would like to have a copy.
That's good to know. Thank you. Are there any questions for Chris? Thank you, Chris. Okay, Jim, you have
Yeah.
finance. A few things.
Finance, yeah. I'm going to cover the insurance piece first. We used to do insurance from April 1st to March 31st. Last year, we went and got a quote, and ICAP came in lower than A.W. Welt and Briscoe. Their workman's comp is June July 1 to June 30, so we just extended for 3 months at current rates and then have gone back. So we need to renew on July the 1st. They've sent us workman's comp, which is up 12.9% from 8,000 to 9,000, basically. And the reason for that is our budget is quite a bit higher for police payroll. It's up 20% from 308 to 255. So we have to sort this out, and I'll be doing that with Chris and Chris. So the other one was the police vehicle, and that went from 10,271 to 11,058. I'm sorry, not police vehicle, liability, which included police vehicles and this extra new building and that sort of stuff. So that's up 7.7%. There are now 4 police vehicles on the policy, and we should only have 3. Chris Lyons said the 4th one is still here, but is part of the lease. They're supposed to come and take it. Is that not right, Chris?
I mean, we only have 3 cars. The new one hasn't come yet. When it does, the old one will leave.
Okay, so then we'll take it off. So I've told him to make it 3. So that's where we are around that particular part. It was interesting. I talked to A.W. Welt and Briscoe. This is for information about bidding on this again, and they were not very interested because the underwriters say if you're just price shopping, we don't want to spend our time on it. They said they would do it, and I said, well, let's look and see how significant these increases are, which I think are, once we get the numbers, we'll get a pretty good understanding of that. They will do it in the future. They would have done it this time if we'd have really pressed them. I did not until I at least saw the numbers. But I think we can still go back to them this was not like we'll never do it, but they said unless there's really significant changes, they don't want to just be involved with price shopping. And this was from the underwriters, not from the insurance agent. So
what do they describe as price shopping? 5 years?
3 years. 3 years. So yeah, I mean, and they said, you ought to give an insurance company 3 years experience unless things are really out of whack or you see that. So 3 years seemed to be the number that was agreeable. So anyway.
And this was an annual comparison shopping that you did? Or were proposing to do?
This would have been, yeah. Okay. So anyway, they just weren't that interested. So it was kind of interesting.
Right.
Okay. The city administration subgroup. I just wanted to talk about the revisions and what we're doing and see if there's any question out of council. I'd also like to get some consensus that we're on the right track. I think the group is Chris Anderson, Mayor Fromm, and Dottie have been meeting. The city administrative position is what we talked about. We think it's a bit premature, but we are still investigating it to determine what's going to be the best time. We think completion of a north building and decision on farm property will give the council better data on the decision-making process. A cost issue. I mean, it's $30,000 probably for a part-time person and up to 55 to 60. Louise has done some comparisons with local ones. 60,000, and then you need to add 20 to 25%, especially on that 60,000 for health and IPERS and all these other kinds of things. So this is not a thing that can be taken very quickly, and so we're still looking at it, but at this point, we're not ready to come back with a recommendation, and we'll come back with some of that later to the council. We have taken a look at the counselors and mayor role, which is in the city administrative policy manual, made some kind of big revisions to that and decided this was very helpful because it more delineated what each person's in charge of streets and sidewalks, building and zoning, those types of things really needed to be doing because it did not elaborate enough on those. And then decided we need to look at the entire city administrative policy manual, and Dottie and I will take a look at that. We also feel like the website needs to be upgraded. and requested that Mike take the lead in this. He and I have talked, and he's agreed to do that. He'll take a look and come back to us with what we need to do to make this thing basically more user-friendly. And so then we'd have to determine who we would go with, and the council would have to decide on how much funding. Because I don't know how much these things cost, but they're 5 figures in my estimation most of the time.
That's without decimal points.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Well, we also think there's some opportunities in payment of bills and salaries, and we do everything by manual check. And so Chris is going to take some lead within that. Also permit procedures and telephone systems. So Chris will work with Lori and others on how do we get over and get these things when we get paid, not have to have money come in, but get transferred into the bank accounts and that sort of stuff. At the same time, keeping separation of duties and powers and all of that. So we'll be taking a look at that. We also felt that we ought to develop a protocol for contacting city engineers and city attorney. People, residents and non-residents, can just kind of do that without any restrictions on them. And Steve and Josiah, for example, are very helpful to them, but do they need to be, and should we start giving them the power to say, hey, you need to go back through the city council to talk about that? So if the council is in agreement, consensus with that, we'll begin working on that type of protocol. So those are my 5 items. I'd be interested in any questions.
Yeah, for item number 2, which is the revision to city administrative manuals, actually not even limited to 2, just to say any revisions made to any council or city document, can you please keep a red line so that the rest of council understands where changes are being made so that that can be tracked? I think it's very difficult to see a brand new document that does not note changes that were made so that the reader can make a comparison of what's involved. With respect to...
Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to redline.
I
And
can
that's a
help with that.
31-page document,
I
or
can help with
39.
that.
Okay.
Great.
But,
Yeah, I mean, it's just...
and I'm not interested in it, but that's fine. We will try to do that. Okay, and if, with Chris's help, maybe I'll be able to, and Dottie's help, we'll get through it, but understand.
Yeah, no, it's really easy.
No, I understand.
It's turn of a button, that's all it takes. And then the other concern that I have here is guidelines for the city engineer and city attorney. Being done through the mayor or city councilor. I think as counselors, it's our prerogative as to when we reach out to legal counsel and or the city engineer. However, I do believe that there should be some discretion with respect, not discretion, but there should be some limits. Should the city engineer be contacted to do what amounts to administrative items that any one of us could do, like call Mid-Am and say, there's a light bulb that's blown out at the corner of so-and-so street, fix it. I mean, there's a huge difference between saying that and then also telling the engineer, is our infrastructure up to code or not up to code? There's completely different levels of engagements for these professionals. And I think that needs to be targeted, that needs to be limited, because that's where most of our costs are coming from. And as you are also considering protocols for contacting city engineer and attorney, I do want to commend the city attorney's office for outlining the billable hours and the tasks that are completed with those billable hours to council. They're very well outlined. I cannot, however, say the same for the engineering. And I think that's something that you all need to discuss as a committee as to the adequacy of disclosure for what tasks are being completed. And so I'd like to add that as a little subcategory to that.
Well, I just, in response to that, we fully understand that there's overuse of the city attorney and the engineer.
there's not
It's just a matter of how we make a decision as to when it's proper and necessary. So that's a difficult decision.
Josiah's availability is absolutely critical sometimes when residents call and they're all upset they have a problem, and I talk to them, but I can't talk to them about the details of what.
But sometimes,
So it's tough to limit those conversations with Josiah to get him before that resident as quickly as possible, and Josiah has been terrific about it.
sometimes, yes, Josiah has been wonderful and very contactable. But what I'm saying is many times the issues are setback, side yard, height of building,
That's housing.
runoff, things that.
That's not engineering, that's housing.
That's correct. That's correct.
Right.
So a matter of distinguishing when to bother is.
And along with number 5, which is when to use the engineer, another issue that I'm not seeing up here, and maybe because it hasn't been brought up, is, most of the work that the city engineer sometimes performs often leaves me thinking it's more of a city maintenance type of a person, or I would say a maintenance or of a repair nature. For example, the sidewalk inspections that take place by the engineer, and correct me if I'm wrong, Josiah, but the engineering department does do those inspections, right?
Yeah, to issue the repairs.
Yeah, to issue repairs, determine the repairs. That is done by other smaller communities in Iowa by a maintenance department or a catch-all department that knows how to read the technical specifications that are issued under the whatever code that the engineers use to demand, the building standard to. So I'd like to have you all also include in your consideration the appropriateness of the city having a contract with a firm that could perform general maintenance at a much lower price than some of the services that we are right now paying for through a city engineer firm that is a full-service firm, but not necessarily one that should really be involved in doing maintenance-level work.
Well, perhaps something I should have said earlier, speaking to some of those points, is many of these last 4 is to clean up our act as a council before we bring on this city administrator. I mean, and that's part of what I personally don't think the maintenance idea is good, but I think the city administrator enforcing some of those things could handle that better. And when you put in a maintenance thing, that means you got to have someone who's going to watch over it. And who's that going to be? Probably the city engineer. So at
a city engineer rate?
Well, who else is going to do it, Sylvia? That's my point.
And I'm not suggesting that we bring or hire an employee. I'm still continuing to suggest that the better plan, given the fit and size of our community, is an independent contractor.
Well,
that's what other small cities have. They can't afford full-time employees and IPers and health insurance and all sorts of other expenses, right? So they subcontract out the work. What I'm suggesting is that there's cost savings to be evaluated from shifting away at the hourly fee of the engineer into a lower paying fee of someone who can accomplish the same task.
And my concern is supervision. And we need to move towards having someone who can supervise it other than one of the 5 of us who,
I'm not addressing that at all.
Well, I am. As this thing turns over, we need to get a city administrator who allows more flexibility in handling all of these types of things. But I mean, I'm not against the maintenance thing, but we need to put the city administrator tasks and understand that, and that's a task that the supervision of that group would be very helpful for that.
The way I interpret your comments, and if I'm misinterpreting, tell me.
Please do, yeah.
Is that if there was a city administrator, you'd be confident that these things might be able to be contracted out in another way because it would be handled professionally by an administrator who oversaw that process.
Right.
One of the greatest satisfactions I have in serving on this council is to meet the needs of residents who have problems. And I can go to Steve or Josiah and solve those problems with their help in a very professional manner.
Yeah.
If it costs money, so be it. It takes care of the community, it takes care of the residents. I've been very satisfied with the outcomes. If a city administrator could do as well, I'll be very happy.
Yeah, I think that would, and could, oversee this maintenance. I mean, that right now, that falls to Josiah at this point. And anything we use with Russ Boyer, Josiah's managing most of that, so.
I think the city's entire structure, and I want to be very clear tonight,
Yeah.
the structure needs to be completely revamped,
Yeah.
reorganized. We're too old as a community to use the excuse that same old is good enough. It's not. We're growing, we're changing, and we have been for a number of years, even before the Maxwell project came on board. And
Well,
I'm suggesting that we need to move a little bit more expansively and also be responsible fiscally as well as resourcing-wise. So I'm not suggesting that we just overexpend in one direction in order to cut dollars here or there. It makes common sense to hire the right people for the right job and not overpay for accomplishing the same task.
And
that's all I'm requesting is that you all evaluate the need for a maintenance person who very likely charges a lot less, has the same, comparable technical experience to accomplish many of the tasks that are pretty routine and not significantly engineering involved in the things that we have done in our community. For example, flushing the
Sylvia.
at the garden center, flushing the garden center faucet thing. We had to call the city engineer to get that resolved, when in fact that could have been a clerk action, or it could have been a maintenance person action, but it involved engineering. And it's that type of wasteful spending that I'm seeing and that I would just like to have addressed, but not, I'm not saying eliminate your engineering department or trade them out. I'm just saying use them judiciously, carefully. It's the people's money.
No, I agree, and that's why I think that's why I'm saying we're going to get to the city administrator position at some point, because that's the person who can best handle those types of things.
So I guess not to get lost in this is, again, I would have some difficulty in accepting that my calls to the city attorney and/or the engineer should be screened by the rest of council. I think if you come up with some general guidelines that are broad enough,
That's what we're doing, Sylvia. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, I don't see us restricting I see them, what I'm trying to do is get people to go through the counselors and the mayor rather than going directly to Steve and Josiah on some points, and Steve and Josiah being able to say, and they'll be able to tell if they ought to be referred back or if they should handle it themselves.
May I make one point to that?
Yeah.
To address your concerns, I can speak to previous councils where the chair of each committee took on more of those duties that you were referring to, especially the flushing of the hydrants. Virginia took that upon herself to get all of that done. So historically, it is the chair of the committee that does some of those, what you call administrative type items.
so that should be disclosed in the job roles of the counselors, right?
Which is what we've added. If you'll go to Google Docs, you'll see the changes that we've made and on the rows, and we welcome any additional ones. I took each of the subcommittee, of our responsibilities and added quite a bit on some of those. So, anything else? Well, we'll continue to work. Continue to keep you informed, and get back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. The treasurer's report. Lori sent the warrants, and are you going to post them?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, since we've got this great system. And
sicknesses. Zooming down to the warrants.
Just watching.
That's okay. I looked them over. I'm sure that they looked them over. There they are.
Yep.
So the warrants are before you. Is there any objection to pay the bills, blah, blah, blah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Who's Joshua Kites? Several lines in the middle in there.
Police officer.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Is there any objection to paying the bills? Hearing none, the bills will be paid by unanimous consent. Okay. Now, I have something I want to ask the council if the city attorney at the end of the agenda has recommended to meet in closed session. And he sent an email, a confidential email, before the meeting. And I would like to ask if the council would go in closed session now. And this would mean I would ask the 5 council, the city attorney, the city clerk, and myself to go into the police office and discuss the closed session. Would any of the council agree and move to close?
I'm getting there.
I so moved to go into closed session.
Okay, motion by Jerry. Is there a second? Okay, there's a second to go into closed session now. Roll call vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. Zimmerman.
Aye.
Casada.
Aye.
Haverkamp.
Aye.
Lane.
Aye.
Maher. Carried.
So you can stay here and we're going to go into the police office. The public can stay here and we're going to go into the police office. We're not going to kick you out in 100-degree weather. Thank you.
I kind of like it at the end.
I do too.
Do you?
Fine.
Okay, so that's paused.
2 requests. One was, when we're short-staffed, a few of the reserve officers have been helping out. I would request that we pay them, I don't know, something like $15 an hour, just in this period where we don't have enough officers. And that would be when they're working, when they're covering a shift, not if they're out riding with someone, that kind of thing. Specifically Jake Mussman and James Sandifer. Those are our 2 certified reserve officers.
I move that we pay our 2 certified reserve officers for covering complete shifts.
Second.
So their current salary is $1 a year?
$2 a year, yeah.
Oh,
So we're gonna
name at $15 an hour. I mean, is it
for
possible
covering a shift?
to do that, to just pay them while covering a shift, but if they're riding with someone not?
What do you think, Lori?
I know that other departments do it, but I don't know what the.
I'm more concerned about making them changing their employment status here.
They have to make a certain dollar amount in, I don't remember what it is off the top of my head.
To get
Like
IPERS.
Hero has to be paid, I mean, he's not allowed to opt out as much as he makes with this.
5,000, 4,800 or something like that. Yeah, what kind of salary, what's the total amount of money we're talking about?
I guess it would be until. I'd have to calculate that. I guess it would be until December when we could have mostly back to full coverage with full-time officers. So if they're covering, I think it would easily become like Harold's rate for amount of time. If they were doing 20 hours a week.
How about I withdraw my motion pending we check some more information on that, on what we need for liability and responsibility and
We could
payment.
put it on the 20th, the special meeting on the 20th, if you want more time to get information.
What'd you say, Lori?
I'll check.
Okay.
So both Mike.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm concerned, IPERS, healthcare, unemployment.
I think healthcare, because they wouldn't be full-time.
That's right.
It's-
Well,
yeah, still be part-time.
pardon? Yeah.
It would still be under
So it'd be
30
IPers.
hours.
It'd be
Yeah.
IPers.
IPers, so, and then unemployment insurance, if they were reverting back to a reserve officer of making $2 a year from where you were. I don't know how that affects unemployment and that sort of stuff, so.
Okay. Well, we can get that answered.
Yeah, that would be helpful. And, yeah,
If we can do it, we'll do it on the 20th then.
Okay, so you both agree, Jerry and Mike, to drop your motion and second? Okay. And then you wanted to talk about vacation
Just that
carryover?
since it was the council's voted on the policy that, you had to use your vacation days by the end of the fiscal year, that Simcox and I be just allowed to carry over or pay out part of our vacation, since we won't be able to take as much.
Probably none. Should we have a motion on that? I think so.
I move that we allow
Vacation.
Officers Lyon and Simcox to either carry over a portion of their vacation or be paid out for that portion which they can't take.
Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Jerry. All in favor? No?
No, I
Discussion?
would be kind of
No?
nitpicking here, but how many weeks of vacation do you get, and how many have y'all taken to date?
I'd have to look it up. I bet we've used, I'd have to look at Lee. I think I've used about half of mine.
And how many?
It was
how much is
170,
that?
170 hours total. It's probably 50.
You've used 35 to.
Yeah, something like that.
So you have a week left, or basically.
Yeah, about a
And
week,
here's, yeah, I don't mind paying out a week's worth. It's when we start getting above that.
Bunch, right.
So I would only urge you.
Well, you could you just cap it at, like, allow us to move or pay out a week, but not
We'll
more?
pay out a week and expect you to take care of the rest.
That works.
Okay, and that's added in your motion and your second?
If I could, though, I think that's the ideal situation, if they can, in fact, take it. If they can't, because it puts the safety of the city in jeopardy, because there's no one to cover, I think that's a problem that we have to face.
Pay out a week, yeah. But they either carry it or pay it, yeah.
Well, let's assume we'll pay out a week, and if that's an issue.
They'll come back.
Come back to us.
Okay.
And I'll
Okay.
more.
Yeah, no, I know.
It doesn't really change the budget though, because they would be getting paid out.
No, I understand, yeah.
I guess it does.
No, it's just the principle around vacation.
That's
When
right.
I see what happens at some government institutions, it bothers me.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Then we have committee report, but we'll just go down to consideration of Resolution 1713, appointing Chris Lyon as Chief of the Police of University Heights Police Department.
I'd like to table that motion until next month.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Mike to table and second by Sylvia. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Okay, motion carries. It's tabled. Streets and sidewalks. Did you have anything today other than, I know that Mike and Dottie were going to talk about the complete streets policy.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead with that.
The other thing is, there was a request to walk around and make sure the bushes weren't interfering with visualization of intersections. I was going to do that last week, but we had-
Now that it's really hot, now's the time to go
we
do
had
it,
some
Jerry.
issues, so we couldn't do it, but I'll plan on doing that after I speak to somebody who knows what they're doing.
I appreciate that, Jerry, because I can't walk around right now.
Thanks, Jerry.
Pat Yegi's the person to talk
Right,
to,
that's-
and yeah,
She has an umbrella. Thank you.
to do the 8-foot height.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Complete streets.
Yes.
We shared the complete streets document. This is something that we'd shared with you last month just to say we were going to talk about this. This is a document that basically when we applied for our bike-friendly city status. This is one of the things that the League of American Cyclists say could get us toward silver. Currently, Iowa City has a complete streets policy. Coralville has a complete streets policy. The MPOJC has a complete streets policy. This language, and Josiah helped put this together, and we tailored it specifically for University Heights. This is in line with all of those other entities that basically says, as we do street projects and other projects within town, we will consider all modes of transportation, walking, biking, likewise, that we are working to provide an interconnected network. There's not a whole lot in here that is very controversial or even interesting. But there are a few things under implementation where it talks about new streets and reconstructed. We will implement complete streets, meaning that if they are arterial streets, we will work towards bike lanes. So we'll work towards things like that. We will make sure that all of our curb ramps are ADA compliant, which is a project that Josiah has worked on for several years with the city and has moved us in great stead. There are some other exceptions where it talks about what to do if it's a relatively high safety risk. If there's bicyclists or pedestrians prohibited by law from using the roadway, we don't have any streets of that high speed, so that doesn't apply to us. We don't have a frontage road. There's also the thing that really gets us for most of this is where the average daily traffic count is projected to be less than 1,000 vehicles per day over the life of the project. Well, we only have 2 streets in town that average over 1,000 vehicles a day. So, and they are Melrose and Sunset. There are some things in place that might prevent a complete street taking place on Sunset because of the way the curbs are aligned, because of the plantings we have. It says if there are things that are too expensive, on a project, it won't happen. The other thing that we talked about and kind of made for us is looking at some of those performance measures. The last 2, especially ridership within Iowa City Transit, CAM Bus and Coralville, and the number of projects in which street trees are planted. That those are things that are pretty easy for us. Like I say, there's not a lot here that I think is very controversial or frankly interesting, but it does allow us to move forward with things like the wide space on Melrose, that it would be, with a complete streets policy in place, it's much easier for us to say we're going to vacate that parking on the south side of the road, realign the center, and put in bike lanes. And that's an easy first step for us.
And it facilitates all of our other requests for monies.
Right, and that's exactly right. Thank you, Dottie. I knew there was something else I needed to mention, that as we go for grants and other things, one of the things that many granting agencies will look at is, do you have a complete streets policy? So this is helpful. Josiah, anything else I missed out of all of that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I was following along. That's front to back. Yeah.
I would move that we would adopt this as a complete streets policy for the city.
And I second that.
Motion by Mike, second by Dottie. Discussion. Let's see. Adopt. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, motion carries.
Excellent.
Then we go to engineers report. Josiah.
So in addition to what's on my report, I wanted to note for everybody that so we awarded the streets improvements project last meeting, and so we've got all the contract documents from the contractor. We had the pre-construction meeting at the end of last week. They're going to start on that the last week of June. The location they're going to start at is over on Sunset, where they're doing the bus improvements. That'll be that last week of June, maybe a little bit beyond. Then they're going to start in on George Street following July 4th. That'll span about 2 to 3 weeks with the various operations they're doing. They're taking off the old overlay, repairing the bad spots underneath, redoing the curb ramps at those corners that we're touching, putting on the inner layer and then the surface layer of asphalt. And then following that...
I just have a question. While they're doing the George project, will it be possible to traverse George, like on the cross streets? Will we be able to?
In a car?
Yeah.
There's going to be road closures on some of those side streets. There's people who live on Marietta who have no way else to get in.
Only way out.
They'll be open to local traffic.
Okay.
For you to go in and out, and the people who have driveways off Sunset. But you're gonna have to come in from the south end because we don't want a bunch of people coming from all different directions.
Okay.
This project has a good quantity of flaggers as part of it. So when they're doing these various operations, you're going to see people out there stopping and directing you when to go and stop. So that operation takes place. That's July to mid-July, and then we've got the panel replacements on Melrose that sort of follow closely behind that at the end of July, and then some street panel replacements back on Sunset, where they're doing the bus work. That's beginning of August to about August 22nd. So that's the schedule. So the first work that will happen will be the end of June with the bus stop work at Grandview.
Any questions? Thanks, Josiah.
Yep.
And at the same time, we're doing the north sidewalk too, right?
Oh, right. Yeah, I did note that. So that'll be pretty unrelated.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Is this posted somewhere on the Streets and Sidewalks webpage as impending, looming construction projects?
Not at the moment, no.
Can you do a short summary just so people like myself will have quick access to what's coming up in this quarter?
What we've typically done, especially when there's detours or notices or things like that, Josiah's given me those, and I've posted them on the front web page as we've needed to.
Yeah, but it's more like a quarterly planning
right.
Situation, Josiah. I'd like to still request just for second quarter what's coming down the pike, that's all.
We'll just take the report and I'll put it right up there. Yep.
And then we'll put it in Streets and Sidewalks, and we can do that third and fourth quarter. Otherwise, I can't remember which of your engineering reports has what. But thank you.
Okay, Sylvia, would you like to go with the update of Farmers Market?
Sure, and I recognize that I've got 3 items, and I'll take them by priority, but I will table discussion of recycling bags for the next meeting in the interest of time. It is now 10:25.
You're very popular right now, Sylvia. Thank you.
You're welcome. Farmers Market update. I think going at it every Tuesday was a strategically good move. We are picking up the pace. Just last week, I delegated to one of the vendors the task of counting how many people walked by. This is fuzzy math, but to report back, it was about 125 people between the time of 5 to 7 p.m. So I take it for what it's worth, but that was her tally, and she was very excited. This vendor group that we have is a core of about 15 vendors, maxing out to about maybe 20 to 21. They're on various schedules. Some of them are here every 2 weeks. Some of them are here only the beginning of the season, and others are going to join us for the entire season. So there's various commitment levels that we have. Who's coming to the farmers market? It's multi-generational, and this time we've allowed dogs to come through. A number of folks realized the disclosure that we were asking for no dogs at the last farmers market, and this year I said, what the heck, let's try what happens with dogs, and that's picked up. So a number of pooches are joining us. I did want to bring back to council a revisiting of the scope of the budget for the farmers market, and that is At the last budget session, we discussed and had consensus for a $600 line item budget. And it was represented by me that it would be used for advertising. Because we have a weekly market and we're getting a lot of feedback from residents, many of whom are saying we want chairs, we want to sit down, and we'd really like not to be standing around. The mayor and I looked into very portable, lightweight folding chairs that can be ferried around and also stored. And for under $125 or $150, we'd be bringing in how many?
15.
About 15. So it's like $6.50 from Errol's, and that's from their retiring series of chairs. So it's not like we're going for prime newly minted chairs. So that is a consensus piece that I'd like to have council agree to. It's for the benefit of the patrons and that visit the farmers market. And I've also had a number of the vendors who sell foods, including my counselor here to my left, who've said, let's make this a dine-in experience, not just a walkout. So I do want to say thank you to all of the vendors who have signed up to support this season in 2017, but more importantly, a big thank you to the athletic club for hosting us again on year 2, and to Curves for being our corporate sponsor. Without our corporate sponsor, I would not be able to provide waivers or reduced or run campaigns at 50% discount for signing up early. So that's what's making this work. So I want to thank the counselors who have made the time to shop the market and attend the market. So thank you, Mike, for buying tomatoes from the plant lady Cindy, and so I do want to say that, and I'll leave it at that. So that is the farmers market. I do want to announce that Z102.9 will be broadcasting live at the farmers market on July the 11th. So if we can post that with a Z102.9 logo, that'll be awesome. We're going to have an entire team of DJs on site. And then I'm working to bring Herky to the farmers market. Herky is likely to be here. If I can make sure that I've got that engagement really locked down to August the 28th, which is the last Tuesday in August. So sign up to Facebook, like us at University Heights Farmers Market, and we'll keep you posted with all firm developments on the farmers market.
I still need advertising stuff from you. You still haven't ever sent me anything to post. You said about the sponsors.
Oh, okay. The logo and all that.
Yes,
Yeah.
please. Or is there going to be a market on the 4th of July?
No
Okay.
market on the 4th of July.
Okay.
And inclement weather continues to be probably the only reason we would not have a farmer's market in addition to the 4th of July. The heat wave has not kept our vendors away, so I hope that people will continue to shop in the heat wave that come in the future. All right, next item, football game day update. It's still under discussion. Mayor and I continue to meet with individuals who we think have important information to share so that we can provide a better work product for this council. That includes the fire chief, it's include our housing inspector and also the building inspector, and we still have a lineup of other individuals that we have yet to round up and get their opinion and best practices. And that's it. I'll table discussion.
When will we have the football game part rules update policy?
As soon as we round up our findings.
Well, we
Much
have the
the similar-
forum that we've already done. I'm not, we just need to get this thing out, I think, in July. And so.
We don't disagree with you.
Well, are you going to meet today?
We're aiming for July. That's what we've discussed.
Yeah.
We're aiming for July.
That you meet July, and if you don't, we need an interim report, because we need to be clear with the folks. That's still a very high priority for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate y'all picking it up. It's dragging around, but
I understand. We're trying to
Right, but
get
you
it
know
out
just
there.
how touchy this subject is, so we're not going to present half have considered work.
Well, I don't want it in September is my problem.
Neither do we, because we will have problems then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now with the chairs, we're going to vote on that.
No, we just need consensus.
And
That
we
the
got a
scope of
consensus.
the budget
We
line
did get a
includes that.
consensus.
Chairs and no tables.
I'd like to see a table tossed in.
Well, we would like to do something about tables.
We'll borrow Louise's.
I'm kind of touchy on my tables because I use them for my family
Is this what we're going to
events.
vote on the 20th?
No. Oh, the farmer's market, no. The farmer's market voting on the 20th involves receipts that are outstanding for the 2016 farmer's market. The 2016 farmer's market was run purely on whatever was collected from corporate sponsors and vending stalls.
Vendors.
And so any expenses are going up against those amounts. I have requested from Lori a confirmation regarding how much was in the 2016 farmer's market so that I can submit, receipts against that remaining amount in order to make sure that it does not go above zero. It has to stay at zero because that was at zero.
Okay, fine.
Right.
So what's our limit for spending for if we can throw in a table or two? Is it 150? Is that what the council agreed to?
Well, how
Or
much
what
does a
did you
table
want?
cost? I mean, are you
A
lightweight portable?
I know a lightweight table. That's huge.
$50 says housing.
Well, I'm also going to work on getting the chairs at the best possible price.
You did fabulous.
But I'm trying to work harder on that. Let's just say I don't want to. This is on TV, but I will try and negotiate that, and then so I won't spend the whole amount of money. I just want to limit,
Let's limit it at 150 because I still have to worry about advertising.
Right. Okay. 150 works. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
No, thank the council. They're all great. All right, so football game update. Jim, you have our assurances that we're working on a work product that is respectable and consistent with the last forum the city had as a community. Discussion of recycling bags. I will pick that up at the next council meeting in the interest of time. And I'm done with announcements, other than to tell you July 11th and August 28th. And yes, Mike, I'll send you the revised rooster image.
Okay.
Thank you. Any questions for Sylvia?
I have just one quick one. Are you guys still going to talk to me? I guess
You're on our list.
Okay.
Yes. Thanks, Chris.
I'm just kind of surprised I'm not involved in it.
That's okay. You're on the list. We're going to include you.
Okay.
Well, I think one of the things that needs to happen with this football is that the police chief needs to come before the council either in July or August to be very clear on what new rules are going on football game working days. And I'll be looking for that in the.
And he will have an opportunity to, we can't bring him in on the front end of the due diligence because we haven't made proposals. So they quite don't make any sense for him to evaluate yet.
I understand your point, Jim. I understand your point. Yeah.
From the beginning.
I do too.
So we'll go to Mike's e-government report.
No, we're going to go right past that. That's the same old boring stuff.
Okay.
I have another thing, Ordinance 207. This is something that I think Pat Bauer, I know Pat and I talked about it in January, and then I never did anything with it. University Heights and Iowa City are the only two cities in Johnson County that have a municipal primary. If more than 3 people file for mayor or more than 11 people file for council, there has to be a primary. That means that our date for filing for a municipal election is earlier than anyone else around us. And it also means that we could possibly have an October primary as well as a November general election. Now that we are the owners of our voting site here, I think we should drop the primary, that there are fewer things to have to schedule. It makes it simpler for the auditor. State code allows you to say as many people file, they're on the ballot. As long as you meet the standards, you go with what you have, and your highest vote getters win. So what Ordinance 207 is Steve just basically took code and made it nice and simple to follow. And I don't know, Steve, anything else you want to add to that?
Not really. It's sort of interesting that it doesn't change the nomination process.
No.
Based on the size of the community, you need 10 signatures now. You need 10 signatures if you adopt this. It just changes, as Mike said, the winnowing of the field, the narrowing of the field. And really what it says is we're not going to narrow the field. Anybody that has 10 signatures gets on the ballot. That way we don't have to have a primary to decide who gets on the ballot. Everybody gets on the ballot. Whoever gets the most votes, down to the number of offices there are, 5 for council, 1 for mayor, that's who wins.
And as near as I can tell, we've never had a primary.
We came close.
We've come close. We've had 10 candidates, but never more.
One who walked away.
Right. So I think it makes it much simpler for us. This allows a September deadline to file for the November elections rather than an August deadline. To me, it's a simpler process. I would
You wanna
move
make a
adoption.
motion?
I would move adoption of Ordinance 207.
First consideration.
First consideration.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion for first consideration by Mike and second by Jim. Further discussion?
Why is Iowa City keeping theirs?
They're crazy. Iowa City has a lot of other things that go on. They also have districts, and they have district seats and at-large seats. So they have a whole layer of complication that allows for that, because you could end up with and they've had district primaries as well as at-large primaries. Being a city of 70,000, I think there's some good cause for winnowing your field of candidates necessarily in a case like that I don't think is the same for us.
Historically, why did University Heights adopt this in the first instance?
It's a default more than an adoption.
Right.
You know.
I see.
So we don't really have a procedure that we've adopted.
Right.
And
This
we've
would have
only
been
had
this
one
would have been what
instance.
standard code was
And we've
back.
only had one instance where we had a possibility, but it didn't happen, right?
Right.
The gentleman walked in the door, asked how many people had registered. I told him, and he walked out the door. He did not want to
So
trigger.
this hasn't historically happened then?
No.
Okay,
No.
so hasn't happened, probably won't happen. I think Jim Lane at the last has made comments that there's a tough time recruiting people for council, so doesn't seem like we'll be triggering this
I think
ordinance anytime soon.
And I'll be honest, the other reason that I was bringing this now is that besides making it easier for us and not having to block off those dates, it does make it easier for the auditor's office, for them to have to not know until August 31st whether or not they've got to run an election, and the first Tuesday in October doesn't give them a whole lot of room.
Yeah,
So-
but the site location is always key. But we're here, so we own our site location. They
But
just have to
they
get all of
also
their-
have early voting and satellite stations and everything else, and I mean they have
They're
a lot
already
to
planned.
they have a lot to plan for with the general.
Yeah.
It's one less thing to throw in their
Well,
way.
I'm inclined to leave it as is, only because it's almost like if it happens, I think it's good planning to have it staggered. And if it doesn't happen, then we really don't have any loss or any damages as a community. As a matter of fact, it just, like, it serves its purpose to winnow down the number of folks, to make it easier for voters to make a decision. If not, you can have another Republican season with 18 candidates, right? Is that a possibility?
Yeah.
Yeah. What does everyone else think?
Can we have a vote?
Let's just vote.
I tend to think we haven't had the history, and we ought to, I support going ahead and taking it down.
Yeah, I do too. I think we clean it up and get it out.
Yep.
Okay, roll call vote.
Casada.
No.
Haverkamp.
Aye.
Lane.
Aye.
Maher.
Aye.
Zimmerman.
No.
Carried.
Okay. Now we have announcements. You already gave some announcements. Are there any other announcements?
I move for adjournment.
I second.
I'm just going to say then, any objection to adjournment? Hearing none, the meeting's adjourned by unanimous consent.
See you here
Instead
next
of going
Tuesday.
at-
Steve, can you pass this over to Louise and Louise over to
You bet.
Chris, please?
Question for you. This is the street contract that we did last month.